You are listening to the Booktrospective Podcast, a podcast for all types of books. And even though we read all types of books across all different types of genres, we want to give a disclaimer. Many of our books and a lot of our content sometimes is intended for mature audiences. And we don't believe in censorship, but we do want our listeners to have the opportunity to decide if our episode or podcast is good for them. So, with that, let's get into the episode. Hey, it's Dominyse.
And Keely.
And you are listening to Booktrospective. And this week we are doing Where Sleeping Girls Lie. And, you know, her name is pronounced like exactly how it's spelled. But hold on, I have to get to it. I don't want to mess anything up. Faridah, I think it's Àbíké-Íyímídé. That's probably wrong still. But that's what it sounded like to me. Unless Keely has a better pronunciation than I do.
Yeah, nope, I didn't even look into it.
Yep,
so.
no, I did. I listened. I was like, oh, okay. It looks how it's spelled. But apologies if that's not correct. But anyways, oh, that's you. I was like, what happened to my screen? I was like, that's you. Okay. Okay, so how was your week?
My week was very uneventful. Very uneventful. Not much happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although the other night I was half asleep and was scared awake by two owls outside my window.
Oh.
It was kind of creepy.
Okay. Well, my week is chaotic. So at the time of this this comes out in May sometime. I'll be married by the time this comes out, but I do get married this weekend, and my life is in shambles, and I'm like running all over the place. I can't decide if I want Carter's hair to be curly or braided. It's stressing me out. I went through his hair and diffused it and did it, but I'm like, it's just so much hair, and that is currently my problem. Also, all these people are like, oh, I thought I RSVP'd. I'm not dealing with that. So my life is in shambles, and I'm very busy this week. And yeah, that's it. I'm done with school though for the semester. So
nice.
Huzzah! I'm so happy for that to be done. Let's just get into this book that I literally just finished because I had 2 hours left all day because I was audiobooking it, and I just been running around like a crazy person. But it's done. We're ready. We're good. Okay. So, do you have the blurb?
I do. It's like I keep stumbling into a dark room, searching for the switch to make things bright again, to make me remember, but the switch isn't there. Was it there before? Sade Hussein, right?
I believe so.
Is starting her third year of high school, this time at a prestigious Alfred Nobel Academy boarding school. That's a mouthful. After being homeschooled all her life and feeling like a magnet for misfortune, she's not sure what will happen. What she doesn't expect, though, is for her roommate, Elizabeth, to disappear after Sade's first night, or for people to think that she had something to do with it. With rumors swirling around her, Sade catches the attention of the most popular girls in school, collectively known as the Unholy Trinity. And they bring her into their fold. Between learning more about them, especially Persephone, who Sade finds herself drawn to, playing catch-up in class, and trying to figure out what happened to Elizabeth, Sade has a lot on her plate. It doesn't help that she's already dealing with the grief from many tragedies in her family. And then a student is found dead. The more Sade investigates, the more she realizes there's more to Alfred Nobel Academy and its students than she realized. Secrets lurk around every corner and beneath every surface. Secrets that rival even her own.
Okay, so yeah, this book was actually pretty good. So it is, how did you classify it again?
It's, I would say, a dark academia thriller.
That's what you said. Okay. So if you could describe this book in one word, what would you say?
I would say dark.
Dark. Okay. I would say, I'm just gonna say the patriarchy. Like, down with the patriarchy. That just summed it up for me. Okay, well, general summary. This book takes place at A&A, or Alfred Nobel Academy, in London-ish area. Mm-hmm. Not very familiar with London, but hey. So we are introduced to, it's mostly in one POV. We get like one little part towards the end of the book that like flips POVs, but we follow Sade, and Sade, like her grandmother, not like the singer. And she is on her way to school because she's been homeschooled her whole life. She's around 17, and her dad has just died. And unfortunately, like, that is her whole family life. It seems like death just is following her everywhere. So she's finally trying to have a normal life, and literally her first day there, her roommate disappears. So this whole book only takes place over like a month. And there's so much in it. It's a lot. But she is like, one, trying to acclimate. She's definitely the new girl, and everyone loves the new girl. And so there's lots of different cliques. This book gives very much like normal world Harry Potter, with like houses, and like they wear ties that represent their houses, and their houses are picked by the different like qualities that they have, blah 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 blah. So she is haunted also by dreams and nightmares, really, of a dead girl. And she used to be a really good swimmer, but like now she doesn't swim as much. She's just not into it anymore. And so she is trying to like be normal, make friends, and also figure out what happened to her friend, who is, well, her roommate. They weren't really friends. But she goes missing, and like it just doesn't sit right with her. So she does make friends along the way. Everybody wants to date her, and she finds herself like in a world of mess, like most of our books seem to do, but she also is there with a purpose. And she does have a backstory that she brings to it. And I don't know, this book is very heavy. It's very real, because I feel like this is an unfortunate reality for so many people. And especially in these kinds of settings, I always say like money, and she has money, and like most of the people at the school do. Money just breeds like the worst things out of people. And humility is not one of them. So yeah, that's kind of like my general summary. I don't know if Keely pulled up the triggers. There are triggers at the beginning of this book, like right off the bat, that I wrote down, which are sexual assault, rape, suicide, suicidal ideation, grief, and death of parents.
And I think that really, for the most part, covers...
That covers it? Okay.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's those weird triggers that I don't know are triggers. So, yeah. But, all right. Well, we're going to get into it. So, if you haven't read this book and you don't want to be spoiled, this is your warning to stop, come back later, and listen to this. If not, we're going to just go ahead and get started. So, this book is broken into 3 parts. And part 1 is The Grave of Dreams. So, we are introduced to our main character, Sade. She is Muslim. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. And she is going to Alfred Nobel Academy. Again, we'll just call it A&A. That's what all the kids call it. And it's a boarding school. And we like are kind of like dropped in this first, like, it's not even considered the first chapter, because it starts at chapter 0, which is very interesting for this book. This is like the prelude or whatever. But we get like dropped into the night of a party, and this is actually before we know it's Sade, but basically a girl is sneaking out of a house. She gets in the car with another girl, and she just says he's dead. So then we kind of get to the actual book. So we are at 5 weeks ago, and so this book leads up to like this current day point, but we start 5 weeks back. And like the chapters, like sometimes I'll mention the days of the week, because sometimes she mentions it. I didn't write it down every single time. But we are actually getting like history from Sade. So when she was 7, she was told that she saw her nanny sneaking out of her dad's room, and was told, oh, like she's just a tooth fairy. I'm 7. Like, I don't, that's so dumb. Okay. And at 10, she found her mom dead in a bathtub from pills, an overdose. And then at 14, she had started begging to go to real school instead of homeschool. And we learned that now, which I believe she's 16 or 17, her father is dead. I think she's 16, because it said 2 years ago. So I think she's 16. So now her father is dead. He died of basically a heart attack. It said something with his heart. And he's been dead for like a month, is what we'll learn. And so that's how she gets to go to boarding school, because now she's finally able to make her own decisions. So she gets to the school, and immediately, like, the head mistress, whatever you want to call her, she comes out and she starts scolding her because she says you're late. And she's like, I'm sorry. She's like, you're 4 weeks late. Like, school's already started and we don't take late people. And she's like, you're not in uniform. And she's like, didn't your parents, like, do your paperwork? Didn't they tell you all this stuff? And she's like, my parents are dead. And the lady's like, oh, like, my bad. And she's like, my dad died a month ago, and I was told that all of that information would be in my file and that the school would understand. And we learned that this lady is the matron of the school, and her name is Miss Blackburn. This school, A&A, has 8 houses, and they're, like, named after scientists. Some of these scientists I didn't know, so I'm like, I don't know how to spell their name. But there's, like, Einstein, Hawking, Mendel, Turing. There's another one. There's other ones, but those are the most important ones. And she gets placed in Turing House. And she, like, basically this house is for people who are kind of like jack of all trades, but like master of none. So they have like no like defined interest. And this house has also produced like the least famous of famous students from this school. So she also learns she's going to be assigned a house brother and sister, which is super weird to her because she's like, I'm good. Like, I've been on my own. Like, I don't need any family members. And, but she's given them anyways. And so her house sister is going to give her a tour. Normally your house sister is like a year older than you, but her house sister this time is actually like in the same grade as her, and actually is going to be her roommate. And her brother is going to be from Hawking House. So she's like immediately like, this seems so cultish. Like, it is very weird. I'm like, girl, you wanted to go to boarding school. Like, I don't know. So we meet her roommate, and it is Elizabeth Wang, and that is her sister. And she is, I'm assuming, like of an Asian type descent because of her name, but she's Irish as well. So that's super cool. And Elizabeth takes her on a tour of the school. And Sade asks about a pool, and it brings back memories of a girl she's seen dead in, like, a pool, basically. So they go to their dorm room, and she's on the 3rd floor because she's a 3rd year, so the floors are broken up like that. And she's in room 313. And they get to the room, and there is a dead rat outside. And her roommate's like, I'll get that. And she's like, I mean, does that happen a lot? Because I want to know. Because I'm getting up out of here. Like, I'm immediately not staying here. But Elizabeth just says like A&A is an old school, but like hopefully not. Trying to say like, make it like, oh, this is just like a rat that got in. But I was like, no, this seems like it was done purposely. Like, it doesn't seem like this rat just laid here and died. So I don't know. But she goes into the room and she tells Elizabeth that, or I can't remember if she's telling Elizabeth or us, but basically, like, Sade sleepwalks when she's really stressed. And sometimes she was telling Elizabeth, because she goes, I can sleep with my eyes open a little bit too sometimes. So, like, don't freak out if you look over and my eyes are open.
I definitely would freak out.
Yeah, like, what is wrong with you? What is going on? So they also go down to like the common area, and the school also has like each house has like a common area, but there's also like a common area for the school. And they meet a boy. He's brown skin, he has bright pink hair, and he like grabs Elizabeth and like is hugging her, and his name is, okay, they say Basil.
Yeah,
his name is Basil, first of all.
Yeah.
Well, I know over there, my European friends, they say Basil and they call him Baz, but I'm here to tell you it's Basil. Anyway, so they meet Baz, and at lunch, he asks if, like, Sade wants the real tour, and they're like, what? And he's like, the people, the gossip, which I'd be like, yes, that is what I do want to know, because I am nosy. So he tells her about Hawking House, and basically, like, that's, like, the frat house. It's the, like, top house. They have the Hawking parties, and it's, like, real, like, elusive to get in, but also Hawking House is, like, full of lowlifes, basically. And so these 3 girls come into the cafeteria, and everyone like stops and kind of looks at them. So obviously they're popular.
I imagine like Mean Girls.
Yes.
Like,
well, what's funny is I imagine, because one of the girls, which I think is April, has like blonde finger waves, and they're black, right? Or what? I don't know if they ever say what they actually are. I don't know if they're black or just like some kind of minority.
I have no idea.
They have brown skin. I'm horrible at this too. But what it made me think of is, did you watch Sabrina? The like newer Sabrina?
I did not.
Okay, so there are these 3 sisters. I'm gonna have to look this up because I need to be correct. Sabrina, the 3. Okay, so the newer-ish Sabrina, I mean, has been off for a few years. It had the Weird Sisters, which was Prudence, Agatha, and Dorcas. And Prudence was like, she was a black girl with like these blonde finger waves. And it immediately made me think of that because they also called them the unholy, or Baz calls them the unholy trinity. Let's see. In the middle.
Okay.
Yeah, it immediately made me think of like that when they came in. So these girls are popular, and yeah, Baz calls them the unholy trinity, or like evil witches of the West, and he says they do demonic rituals on the weekends. And all Sade can think is like, these girls are like beautiful, especially the one who we learned is April, who is like Regina George. So we learned that the girl that's like the most beautiful looks like Naomi Campbell. And actually, the one who's most beautiful is Juliet. And she is the rugby goalie. And then there's another girl with them who's like a blonde, but she kind of looks kind of scary. That's Persephone. And Baz says she supposedly cut off like a man's member and keeps it in a jar in her room. Slay. And then April is like the leader of their group. And she also used to be Elizabeth's roommate. And when Sade like looked at them, she realizes Persephone is staring at her. So she feels like something bad is going to happen. She just has like this bad feeling. And she's like, I shouldn't have came here. I should have stayed at home. And she started like zoning out while she's sitting at lunch with them. And Baz and Elizabeth are like, are you good? And Elizabeth asks, like, do you want to go on more of a tour? So they do. And she, like, is thinking that they're a couple. And she's like, oh, I kind of, like, wish I had something like that. Like, that's nice or whatever. So her and Elizabeth go to the greenhouse because Elizabeth used to be the president of the biology club. But their class pet, which I think was a hamster, died. And she got demoted. But Elizabeth wants to be a botanist. And Sade just asks her, like, are you with Baz? And she says, like, no, I'm not his type. So, like, Baz is into guys. She's not his type. They're more like siblings. Apparently, her mom was Baz's grandmother's nurse because his grandma had cancer, I believe. And so they've known each other since they were kids. And Sade starts thinking that she feels like Rogue from X-Men because she feels like her touch is lethal because everyone that she loves dies. And Elizabeth says, like, well, you have 2 new friends now, like, if you want us, basically. So Sade goes to get her key from Miss Thistle. So, like, Miss Thistle is like another teacher kind of person at the school. And she's told that she can visit all of the other houses as long as the doors are open and it's before curfew. She goes to the sports center that she, like, sees them building. And there is a pool, like, currently being built. And there's also, like, a pool that they can currently use. And she's thinking of the girl in the water that she keeps thinking about. And she hears someone say, like, you shouldn't be here. And there's a boy. Like a black boy or whatever he is. And he's like in a Speedo. Slay king. And he tells her like, oh, you shouldn't be in here because you're wearing outside shoes. And she's like, oh, like crap. Like I know, like my coach would kill me or whatever. So he dives into the water and like swims across to her. And he's like, you're new. And he asks, this is where he asks like, oh, is your name Sade like the singer? And she's like, no, it's Sade like my grandma. Because I immediately thought of the singer too. So she leaves and she like has to use her map to find her way back to her dorm. And her dorm, the touring house, looks like an old castle. Like it's eerie, but like in a cool way. So she goes in and she stares at the name board on her door and someone comes up to her and is like, what are you doing up here? It's almost past like weekday curfew and you shouldn't be out of your room, which like I can't go in the hallway. I think that's so weird. Like, is the bathroom, does it ever say like, are there bathrooms in
I
their
think
rooms?
there are, yeah.
Okay. But like, I can't come out here for any reason whatsoever after like 9 o'clock. That's extremely strange. But anyways, it's Jessica. She's like the house prefect, and they even use I guess that's like an English thing, but like Harry Potter, like they had prefects. So Jessica's like, you know, I'll let you slide this one time because you're new. So she goes in and she tries to go to sleep, and all she can think about is this girl she keeps seeing, and that's basically why she sleepwalks. Also, is because like she doesn't sleep very well because of that, and we go to the next day. So she wakes up and Elizabeth is gone. So she just like gets ready, assumes like she had something to do or whatever. And Miss Blackburn wants to see her and she goes to see her and she's like, you're late. And she said, I literally just saw the person who wanted me to come down here. How am I already late to you? But she gets introduced to her house brother and it's the boy from the pool. His name is Augustus, but he goes by August. He is the deputy head boy because they have prefects and they have like head boys and girls too, whatever. And he gives her his number just in case she gets bored or whatever. And she goes to her first class, which is like the only class she ever goes to in this book, which is literature. And she gets assigned to Persephone to help catch up on their work. So in class, though, for like working in class, she gets paired with a boy named Francis, and they're currently like reading Macbeth, which luckily I have never had to read Macbeth. I've read a lot of like required literature, but I've never actually read Macbeth. But Francis smells like pot basically, and he looks bad. He's like staring out the window, and there's two people outside like arguing or something, and he just like abruptly gets up and goes to the bathroom. So she joins another group to finish working. After class, Persephone comes up to her and she's like, I can meet you tomorrow at this time to help with your presentation. Like, she doesn't give her like a time or anything, she like to ask like, does that work for you? But I mean, I guess like, what else are you doing? Like, it's not like you can go home or anything. And she's already like extremely overwhelmed with like the workload at the school. And she goes to her room, and Baz is at the door, and he's like, I'm looking for Elizabeth. She's not texting back, and I haven't seen her since yesterday. And he says, well, like sometimes she does do this, like she just wants to be alone. And him and Sade have like this awkward like interaction because she is not a hugger. And I feel you, sis. So he's like, okay, well, let's work on like a handshake basically. So like they're starting to work on this handshake. And she gets his number to let him know, like, if she sees Elizabeth. And she thinks, like, maybe we should report that she's, like, missing or whatever. But she doesn't. And she, like, goes to her room. Like, the whole day goes by. And she never sees Elizabeth. She doesn't come before bedtime. So the next day is Wednesday. And she's still not there when she wakes up. So she leaves the building. And, like, outside there's police and people, like, everywhere. And she goes into her lit class. And she has to work with Francis again. And she gets summoned to the headmaster. The headmaster is Mr. Weber. And also with Mr. Weber is Miss Blackburn and the police. And Mr. Weber says, like, you're not in trouble. We're just here to ask questions. They ask her, like, if her and Elizabeth are close. And I'm like, I met her yesterday. Like, you know that
Are we close? I mean...
Like, I saw her for 5 hours.
I don't even know her middle name.
Gosh, I barely... Like, I don't know a single thing about her. And she's like, no. And... they ask her, like, how long she knew her. 12 hours. And, like, when did you last see her? And they asked if she was in bed all night. If Sade was in bed all night. And she's like, well, I can't say for sure. And that's because she sleepwalks. But she doesn't tell them she sleepwalks. And they're like, okay, like, yes or no. Like, what that is like. And I'm like, girl, that is kind of like a weird explanation. Like, just say yes.
Right.
So they think that something has happened to Elizabeth and basically are doing an investigation, and she is currently deemed missing. So everyone's like looking at her weird because obviously she got called to the principal's office, and she goes and meets Persephone. Everyone is gossiping, saying like it's Sade's fault that Elizabeth is missing, and she runs into Baz, who is like crying on the phone with his aunt, and he says he was on the phone with Elizabeth's mom trying to like basically act normal so she doesn't freak out, but he's upset because he knew something was off yesterday and didn't like do anything, and now she's missing. So even though she doesn't like to, she hugs him and says like everything's gonna be okay, we'll find her, and she knows like she shouldn't promise that because she can't guarantee it. So she gets to her room, and there's 5 officers in her room searching, which would piss me off because like, let me be there, like, or at least outside. Like, this is my room also, and like, if I'm not a suspect, I don't want you just going through my stuff. And so Miss Blackburn is there also and asks if she wants to switch rooms, and she's like, no, which I probably would have switched rooms. I'm like, yeah, I'm good. But she feels guilty because she didn't report Elizabeth missing either. So the police clear the room and like say she's good, and she goes in there and like she starts like going through the drawers and like Elizabeth's side of the room, but she doesn't see anything. So she decides to go to the pool for some peace, and someone's already in there doing laps, and it's August. He says, new girl, are you going to get in today? And she says she doesn't know if she even remembers how to swim, even though like she's dressed to swim today. And he says that basically he thinks she's scared to get in. So that she gets in, and like they kind of like, they were playing around or whatever. And she is like an excellent swimmer. Like she beats him. They like do laps, and he says that she should try out for the team because she's better than them. And she says, I don't really do that anymore, but he can't believe it because she's just such a good swimmer. And then they go and they're like, okay, let's see who can hold their breath the longest. And she starts to do it and like is beating him, but all of a sudden like the water turns red and she sees a dead body, and she just starts like screaming and panicking, and he carries her out of the pool. She tells him like, you know what, you won, like, and then she's just out of there. So they go to the next day, it's Thursday, and the headmaster calls an emergency assembly, and she goes and sits with Baz. I want to say Baze every time, but it's Baz. And they tell like everyone that Elizabeth is missing, and they're asking for information like on anything someone might have seen. And he asks her like where her next class is, and he says he'll take her there. But then like when they start walking, she's like, I don't recognize where we are. He tells her he needs to tell her something. And he says, I think something has happened. Weber is saying like she ran away at night, but I don't believe it. And she never turns off her phone, but it is now. And like he's been texting her and everything. And Baz says like, what if someone took her? And he says she does like leave campus sometimes, but never for this long. And he tells her like she leaves because Elizabeth would feel caged being stuck on campus. And he says Weber knows she does that, so he's basically dismissing this as like one of those times that she goes off. But something about this story just doesn't sit right with Sade. So she asks if Elizabeth was meeting someone when she would leave, and Baz says that messes me up every time. I don't know, like I'm almost about to just call him Basil. But Baz says no, she never told me about meeting anyone, but Sade knows like everyone has secrets, and she thinks what if Elizabeth had left at night and gotten hurt, and like she could have been the only one that possibly could have helped her. But she goes to lunch for like the first time all week, and like most of the food is not halal, but it's basically like in Muslim culture, like they have like certain things about being clean. Like, I don't know if that's a culture where it's like the left hand and the right hand, like one's the dirty hand, one's the clean hand. Like things have to be made a certain way. So like most of the food at the school she can't eat because it's not halal. And so she just decides to eat pasta. And she's sitting alone, but then the three unholy girls like walk up to her and they're like, can we sit here? And I'm like, okay. So April starts asking her, like, where did you go to school before? And, like, if you were friends with Elizabeth. And April says, since you're alone, like, we wanted to offer you to sit with us. And she notices, like, what looks like burn marks on April's arm, which I feel like we never get back to. Do we?
We don't.
Yeah, okay. We never circle back to that. Okay. Well, so who knows? And Sade agrees, like, for them to sit or whatever. And April says that they ask her to eat with her again on Monday. I think it's Friday. And she's like, yeah, sure. So April says, like, basically she's looking forward to getting to know her. And Sade's wondering, like, why do they want to get to know her, basically? But she's like, well, maybe I can learn stuff from them. So school's over, and she goes to meet Baz for, like, a search party for Elizabeth. And it's just them. Like, nobody else is there. And so she like pulls up her social media and sees that Baz, Juliet, which is one of the unholy girls, and April have all followed her on social media. So she decides to like go to his page and find Elizabeth's profile, and it's like outdated. She hasn't updated anything. So her and Baz are going to go on the search party in the town, and Miss Blackburn is actually going to chaperone them because like they're minors, they're not allowed to just go on their own. And so they basically have until 7 o'clock to look because she's like, my show's going to be on or whatever. So they go to this cat cafe where Elizabeth goes frequently and like is asking for video footage, but the owner's like, he doesn't want to give it to him and like kicks them out basically. And then Baz starts shouting that the owner is a sexist bastard and everyone should leave from there, and then like grabs her hand and runs. And Sade thinks like the cat cafe is weird, and it's like a cafe with computers, and she wonders why Elizabeth would go there. And Baz says like basically at school they search and monitor like everything, even their phones, which
yeah, I like
yeah, where I need some privacy, like that's much. I didn't go to boarding school, but I kind of went to like a boarding school, and like they didn't search our phones. That's too much. So they don't find anything while they're searching, and Baz feels like a crappy friend, basically. And they go back to Miss Blackburn, and the car won't start, which I thought this was going to be more, but it wasn't anything. But they basically like end up sitting there for like an hour and a half, waiting for the emergency service to come. And while they're waiting, like it's raining, and Sade sees like the girl again in her like dreams or whatever, and she like makes an unhappy face on the windows. So they get back to campus and they ask why Miss Blackburn why she took them to town to search, because the police had already searched the town, and she basically says like she wanted to put their mind at ease. And her and Baz are still like working on their little handshake, and they like both go their separate ways. So she goes to her room and she's like, my key is gone. And she's like, great, like Miss Blackburn's gonna kill me because my key is gone. But under the mat she finds another key that says S on it, and it unlocks her door. So she assumes it was so her window is open, her drawers are open, and like now Elizabeth's side of the room is like completely like cleaned. And there's a wooden music box on Elizabeth's bed. So she opens or goes to the box, and the lid says, my dear Elizabeth. And she opens it, and like inside is another box, and there's like notes that are all like nonsense, and there's like an invitation. And then there's a knock at the door, and it's Jessica, and she says like, why are lights so on? Like it's lights out are at 9:30. Ma'am, I'm not going to bed at 9:30. Like that's absurd. That is obtuse. I'm not. Being in my room at 9 o'clock. All right, maybe going to bed at 9:30. Right. My kids don't go to bed at 9:30. I try to make them go to bed at 10. And I could be a horrible mom. Don't judge me. Judge yourself. But 9:30 when my lights out? That's wild. So anyways, so she goes back to like looking through this box and there's letters on the box and it says like TG. And she's like, who is TG? So the Friday, so maybe that was Thursday because now it's Friday. And she's like late again, but like she couldn't sleep that night. And so they go to class and they're doing these presentations on Macbeth and like who was the villain. Of course, Francis gets up and talks and he's like a super misogynist. Persephone gets up and she's a lesbian. So like she's super like feminine, like support and all of these things. And Sade goes and she says that Shakespeare was actually the villain, because basically like Lady Macbeth just like represented his like negative worldview of women, and so like he truly was the villain. And she does this like really like amazing presentation and like nobody claps for her. They're like, what? And the teacher is like, oh, you did a really good job. So she wants to show Baz this music box, and so she realizes that the letter she saw inside of it was actually in Morse code. So Persephone comes up to her at the end of class and says, like, I liked your presentation. And she says, like, I'll see you at lunch or whatever. And when she gets to lunch, they're not there yet, but Baz is, like, waiting at, like, her normal table. So she tells him about the box. And he says, okay, well, that box isn't from her mom or family or anything because Elizabeth doesn't have a good relationship with her family. And we learned that Elizabeth was raised by her great aunt, and she doesn't even go home on, like, holidays or, like, anything. And she tries to keep school and home separate. And all Sade can keep thinking about is, like, Elizabeth in the past tense. And she's, like, trying to, like, not think that way because they don't know that she's dead. So April comes in and, like, waves at her. And he's like, why is April waving at you? And he can't believe that they asked her to join him. And he's like, go! Like, what you talking to me for? Like, get over there and sit with them. And we learned that this is April's birthday month. And, of course, her birthday is October 31st. And August comes in and he has a guy with him. And we learned that August is April's twin. So they're twins. And the other boy with August is Jude. He is the head boy and the swim team captain. So Juliet mentions that there's going to be a vigil for Elizabeth, which April feels like is unnecessary because they don't, like, Elizabeth is not dead. And Juliet says, like, well, it's more than likely she is because every hour that she's gone, like, it's more likely. And she's basically like, I watched true crime. Like, I know, whatever. And then Francis comes in and he looks, like, super agitated. And then he goes up to April and they just start making out. And no one can, like, believe that this is a couple. Like, what is going on here? This is not real. And Persephone's just, like, sitting at the table reading a book. And she's like, some of us are trying to eat here. And Francis just, like, flips her off and, like, goes back to making out with April. And so after lunch, Sade goes to her room and tries to get the box because she put it under her bed and it's gone. So she goes to Jessica, the head girl, whatever she is, the prefect, and is like, you know, someone came into my room. And Jessica says, like, well, you said the same thing yesterday about your windows. And she's like, yeah, I know, but it happened again. And Jessica says, like, well, like, I can't help you. Like, there's no, they call it CCTV, which is so funny. There's no CCTV, like, on the floors for privacy. And like basically there's only cameras at like the building exits, so like I can't help you. So Sade goes to the security office and she is like waiting for Baz, but she like sneaks in there and she hears someone coming, so she like hides in the security closet and it's just the security guard. But then he leaves again, so she goes and checks the cameras for Turing House, and she notices that like right after lunch there was a hooded figure that exited the building, and he's wearing like a black, or whoever they are is wearing a black logo, a hoodie, and it has a white logo on it, and it looks like a fish, which is similar to the invitation she found inside of the box. And the person is holding a box that looks exactly like the music box. So the door handle starts rattling to the security office, so she like jumps under the desk, and it's the guard. He's back. He comes and sits at the desk, and I'm like, how big is this desk? Because like she's under there, his legs are under there, and like he keeps moving, so she keeps like shuffling, and I'm like, how big of a desk is this? Because there can't possibly be that much room. So she, like, her phone buzzes and she, like, freaks out, but it's Baz, and she's like, I need you to call reception and report something that'll make, like, security come. So the phone to security rings, and the security guard leaves, and so she, like, tries to hurry up and get out of there, and she runs right into Miss Blackburn. And so Miss Blackburn's like, yeah, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, I was looking for you, which I would have been, like, in the security office, but whatever. But Sade says, like, I wanted to get info on, like, how to become head girl, because she sees, like, a poster on the wall. And Miss Blackburn is like, I can't really believe, like, you're asking me that. And is like, you know, you need teacher recommendations. And, like, the first thing you need to worry about is, like, getting your grades and stuff together, not being head girl. So she goes and meets with Baz, and he basically said he called and told them that some crazy person let out all the guinea pigs from their cages, and he actually really did it. He let out all the guinea pigs because he's like, oh, I gotta wash this guinea pig pee off my hands. so her and Baz go to her house, and she gets stopped by like a girl handing out vigil flyers, and she tells Baz like the girls, the unholy girls had invited her to eat lunch with them again on Monday, and she thinks that they're just being nice because she's new, but he's like, yeah, they've never done that for any new person, like it's different. So she tells him like that box is gone now, and she tells him what she found on the security cameras, and Bass just goes like, Turing House is actually known for its thieves. And he says, like, it's kind of strange, though, because, like, they don't normally hit mid-semester. Like, they normally wait till the end, like, when people are getting, like, gifts for Christmas and stuff like that. And they don't normally steal things like a music box because it's kind of pointless. Like, they steal good stuff. And so Sade tries to remember, like, what the code was on the invitation that she saw, and she knows that it translated to something about rats. And Baz doesn't know, he didn't know that August was April's brother, which is crazy to me. Because it seems like that's very common knowledge, like, throughout the whole rest of the book. Right. So, I don't know. But he says that basically those two get treated like they're royalty here. And the headmaster, is he their godfather? Or is he just Jude's stepfather? I know he's Jude's stepfather or something like that. I don't know if he also has something to do with August and April.
I think potentially.
Yeah.
But I
don't know. They're like spoiled rich kids, basically. Yeah. And then Baz says that Jude is A&A's resident fuckboy and, like, basically watch out for him. So the next day she goes to the vigil, and the students there are, like, literally just gossiping about what they think happened to Elizabeth. And someone's like, yeah, I heard she was dating, like, an older boy. And so, Sade texts Baz and is like, was Liz, like, dating anybody? And August, like, walks up to her and she asks, like, what would you do if, like, something was stolen? And he's like, oh, you live in Turing House, like, bad luck, basically. Although that's just, like, a known thing that people steal from them. And he says, like, you could have a teacher check the CCTV. And then the headmaster, like, shows up and says that Elizabeth has been located. She's at her aunt's house and is taking a break from school, so the police are going to be leaving. And August tells her, like, again, like, hey, you should try out for the swim team again. And she's like, I don't swim anymore. So she texts Baz and is like, hey, like, you know, good news or whatever. And he doesn't reply right away, and she, like, runs into her English teacher, and she tells him, like, hey, something was stolen from me. And he's like, oh, okay, I'll check the footage for you. But she can't stop thinking about Elizabeth, and, like, it just doesn't feel right, like, this whole finding her thing. So she goes to her room and starts, like, going through Elizabeth's stuff again. And she notices that, like, there's a Nirvana poster on Liz's wall, and it's, like, kind of coming down. So she goes to fix it, and she finds an envelope behind it. And there's photos of Elizabeth, like Elizabeth and her former roommate. There's all these pictures, and she's like, why would she hide this behind her poster? But then the final one, like, makes her freeze. And on the back of it, it says, like, 3 months ago, or 3 months, it says 3 months on it. And she doesn't immediately tell us, like, what it is. And Baz replies and says, like, what's up? And so she tells him that Liz was found or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then she looks at the picture again, and she can see Elizabeth, who's wearing sunglasses, and she can see in his reflection. And there's a boy taking the pictures. And then there's another picture of her kissing this boy, and it's August. And earlier at the vigil, she had asked, like, oh, did you know Elizabeth well? And he was like, no, I barely knew her. Really? And then Baz replies and says, Elizabeth's aunt died 2 years ago, so she can't be at her aunt's house. So Baz tells her, like, yeah, her aunt died from brain cancer, like, during their first year here. He says that her mom had never told, like, the school that her aunt had died, so, like, they wouldn't know, like, that her aunt was dead. But Sade thinks it's weird because the headmaster had said, like, well, they were going to contact her mom and let her know, like, where she was. And Baz says, like, basically her mom is sick, and that's why her and Elizabeth don't get along right now, because they basically had a falling out over the fact that Elizabeth's mom has Alzheimer's, and she wanted her to get early treatment, and her mom wouldn't. So Sade thinks that someone else must have sent this email then and knows where Elizabeth is. And she knows August is hiding something, and she's going to find out. So she wakes up the next morning, and she's on the floor, and she knows she was sleepwalking. I thought that was going to be more prevalent in this book, too.
Yeah, I thought so, too.
And nothing really came from that. But she is like, I want to confront August, but she, like, wonders if he's the one that broke into her room. So Baz comes in, and he's panicking, and he kept one of the guinea pigs, even though they're not allowed to have pets. And he's been feeding this guinea pig muffins because he named the guinea pig Muffins. and so they go to the vet, and like the pig's gonna be fine, but they get supplies for him and like go back to campus, and she goes over to like Baz's room in his house, and he has someone looking into like the email for the dead aunt. And we learn like that, I can't remember which house he lives in, but it's like super boring. And he says that basically he got put in this house because like they just didn't know what to do with him. And so that's where they put people that they don't know what to do with. So he gets them like tea, and she shows him the picture and tells him like about August. And he says like, you know, basically the signs were there, but like Elizabeth never talked to him about boys basically. And she asks if he thinks that August has something to do with what happened with Elizabeth, and he says, I honestly don't know. He says April had been Elizabeth's roommate, and they think like maybe August is the one sending these emails. And Baz says he hates the school and how they barely were even like looking for Elizabeth, and like this one email just like settled them basically, when they would never have let this fly for one of their elite students. And he says maybe he's overreacting and doesn't know Elizabeth like as well as he thought she did. And like she starts to feel guilty and sad for him. And she knows that Baz is just saying this because he feels responsible. So it's Monday, and she's only been here a week, and all this stuff has already happened. And Sade's thinking about how she was like kind of the black sheep of her family, and she had bad luck, and that's why she wanted to come to this school. So she goes to Lit, and she gets her like presentation back, which he told her good job, and she got a B-, and she's pissed. Like, I never get B-, and like that was me. I understand. And Frances is like, oh, we got the same grade, and she's like, oh hell no, I didn't get the same grade as Frances. Like, I know good and damn well. She's like, I beg your finest pardon. So that day in class, Persephone pairs up with her and like kicks Francis out of the group because he sucks. And her teacher like asked her to stay after class, and he's like, look, you did a really good job, but you didn't follow the rubric. Like they were supposed to use visual aids, and she didn't do that part. So like he wanted to give her a higher grade, but like she just didn't do the job correctly. So she's like, okay, like that makes sense or whatever. And then when she leaves, Persephone's waiting for her after class, and Persephone says that Francis is a pothead and doesn't know why April hangs out with him. And she tells like Sade that they haven't even been dating that long. So the next day, Persephone does like the same thing. Like she keeps showing up at the end of class and like keeps asking Sade personal life or questions about her life. And then Persephone invites her to one of Juliet's games because she plays rugby. And she like feels like this is an intimate like invitation, and she starts to feel like she's fitting in. She notices like Jude staring at her, which again is like the captain of some team or whatever, and he's been like doing this frequently. So like today she's like, I'm just gonna stare back at him, like, what do you want? So he keeps hanging around, and Juliet is like, oh, it's obvious like why you keep hanging around, and like looks at Sade like he likes you basically. Juliet says that she needs to get something from her locker and asks Sade and April if they want to come like with her, and she asks April and Persephone like if they want to come with her, and so Sade like kind of feels left out, like, dang, did I do something already? But then April asks Sade like, you want to come too? And she's like, okay. So they go with Juliet, and she runs into Jude again, and like he basically kind of like cuts her off before she can follow them, and he asks like if he knows her from somewhere, and he goes, maybe my dreams. And I was like, disgusting. And literally Sade says like, does that line like, does that work for you? Like, is that successful? Is that a good pickup line? And he just laughs and says like, no, he feels like he does know her though, and he offers to help her catch up with the girls. And that pisses me off because like when you find everything out, like you asshole. But anyway, so he asks Sade like, why did she come to this school? Like being homeschooled and all that. And she says like, my dad died and I could either come here or go like live with my family in America. And Jude asks her, like, do you want to go get coffee? And she says, I'm not interested in dating. And he looks, like, kind of shocked because I'm sure no one ever tells him no. And he says, like, who says it was, like, a date? Like, basically, he's like, I can bring August. Like, it doesn't have to be a date. So they plan for Friday, and he's like, I'll see you Friday. And she's like, yeah, I'll see you and August on Friday. So then she sees Juliet and she like smiles, and Persephone is like looking really pissed off and displeased as she like goes towards them and walks away from Jude. And she gets a message from Baz, and he asks like, is it true? And she's like, what? And he's like, you and Judas. And she's like, dang, like the walls be talking in this school basically. And Baz says like he always has the same moves: coffee first, then dinner, and then he'll take you to Paris basically. Like that's what he does with the girls. So Sade is having like a horrible day after this. Like she just cannot keep up with the schoolwork. Her pen explodes all over the place. She's running late to stuff. And she's like, this is a bad omen. Like I shouldn't be here. And her lit teacher says like that he got access to the CCTV footage. Like, do you want to go see it? So, she sees Persephone like waiting at the locker because normally she's been waiting for her after class, and she like stops and talks to her for a second, and she's kind of thinking like, how do I fit into this group? Like, you know, are we good or whatever? But she knows like this is just my anxiety, and she asks Persephone like, do you like me, basically like hanging around? And Persephone says like, I eat lunch with you every day, and I don't eat lunch with people I don't like. So yes, and so that reassures her, like she feels good or whatever. So she goes with her teacher to see the footage, and now there's nothing on the video. Like that hooded figure is completely gone, and her teacher's like, oh, that's good news, like check your room, like I'm sure the box is in there, whatever. But she knows someone's watching her and they're like interfering. So she goes to meet with Baz, and he has the email, and he found out that it got sent from somewhere like on school, like they traced down the location from where it was sent from. So she goes back to her room, and now the box is back, and it's on Elizabeth's bed again, but now the letters inside of the box are gone. And it's just like full of fake jewelry. And she's like, this is like a fake, like this is not real. And she texts Bass like to update him on what's going on. So she decides to go see August, and he's at the pool, and she's like, I'm going to swim. We're going to find out. So they swim around, and she says, let's play a game of truth, not truth or dare. Let's just play truth. And he's like, how do you play truth? And she says, I'll ask you a question. Like, why did you lie about Elizabeth? And he like immediately stops smiling. And he says, like, why are you like asking me that now? She basically tells him like she found some pictures or whatever, and she found them after she'd already talked to him the first time and didn't want you to think that I'm like accusing you, even though like that's what she's doing right now. And August says like, okay, I knew her, but like I didn't know her. Like we just hooked up a few times. Like it was casual. She was hooking up with other guys, and I haven't spoken to her since like the last time we hooked up or whatever. And he says like they met basically because she was April's roommate. So after school the next day, Persephone is waiting for her, and she's supposed to go to Juliet's game that day. And like she's also supposed to meet with Jude and August like around the same time, so she's trying to figure out how she can sneak off and do that. So she goes to the game, and they're playing. Okay, I thought it was rugby, but then it was lacrosse. So I don't know, lacrosse, rugby. It's one of those those sports I don't know anything about. But they're playing this school called the Nightingale Academy, and Sade just like feels sick seeing them. And then April like just shows up, and she looks all like disheveled. Her hands are like stained like black or whatever. Like she looks a mess. And she basically says she was with Francis. And during the game, Sade doesn't realize this, but she's literally holding Persephone's hand. So after the game, she tells the girls, like, you know, I used to swim, and like trying to relate with them about sports or whatever. And they tease her and Persephone because they're like, oh, like the last two girls that Persephone dated were also swimmers. Like you're her type, basically. And then a girl from the Nightingale school comes up and is like to Sade and is like, do I know you? And she's like, no, you don't know me, basically. And April kind of snaps at the girl, and she's like, she said she doesn't know you. And so the girl leaves, and Persephone turns to April and was like, April, like that was so unnecessary. And April's like, I'm sorry, like I'm just cranky or whatever, I'm hungry. And so they go to leave, and Sade like holds back some tears, and then she's like, I just have to go, whatever. So Persephone says, like, before she leaves, she's like, you know, you're always, like, on another planet. It's like you're on Mars. Like, you just kind of zone out. And Sade is like, you know, I have to go somewhere. Do you want me to bring you something back from Mars? And Persephone's just like, bring me something sweet. So she goes to the pool, and, like, August isn't swimming because basically, like, it was a swim meet today, too. And so we learned that August got, like, swapped out for Francis because August is like a reserve swimmer, so he's like kind of like a fill-in basically. And August is a third year, but Francis and Jude are fourth years. And so we learned that Francis really wanted to swim because something happened, like an incident happened the year before. Do we ever learn what that is? There are lots of plot holes. I was like, my rating is going down. I was like, wait a minute. There are a lot of plot holes. So apparently there was an incident last year. So Francis hasn't been like swimming on the team like fully or whatever. But he had begged Jude to like swap him out with August for this like swim meet. So he does. And then also there's like scouts at this meet. So like Sade's like, oh, like there were scouts here. And August is like, it's fine. Like whatever. I have next year. Whatever. Jude wins because he's like a super good swimmer or whatever. And she realizes that Francis has been here all day. So when April said, like, she had been with her boyfriend, like, she couldn't have been with him because he was here. And so she knows April's lying about something. So August says that, you know, I'm being dragged on your date or whatever because no one tells Jude no. And they go on this like little coffee date, her, Jude, and August. But she spends most of the date like talking to August, and they're like arguing about how SpongeBob is the villain of his show, basically. And then August leaves, he has somewhere to go. So Jude asks, like, did you like enjoy this? Did you want this to be a date? And he says, I'm gonna win you over. And she thinks like, this man thinks he's like a god or something, and you are not. So after the little coffee date, she goes by Persephone's room and she just leaves her a little Mars bar. And she goes back to her room and Baz is sitting outside and he's been crying and looks really angry. And he's like, where have you been? And he's like, it's like Elizabeth. And he says they took her stuff. Her mom like asked for it basically. So apparently like the school packed up all of Elizabeth's stuff and shipped it to her mom in Ireland. And he says, I tried to tell them like the email was fake and that her Aunt Julie was dead, but they shipped her stuff off and like they don't care. And he's like, I tried to show them the GPS thing on my phone. And she's like, what GPS thing? So apparently they basically have like, they can share their location like on an iPhone basically. But he had lost his phone when, at some point, like when she first met him. But he finds his phone and like resets it. And on the app, it basically shows that Monday night, Elizabeth had sent the 5 sandwich emojis, which is like her and Baz's like distress signal. And then also her last location was like on the path between Hawkins' house and the sports center. And that's like the last thing that recorded. And like, again, she wasn't answering or anything. And now it's not pulling her location. And Baz says like there's blind spots in the cameras. So either Elizabeth was like super good and knew where all of the cameras were and like got off campus, or she never left the school. And he says like, what if the school's in on it and they know something? And what if like, and he says like, he also wonders like, okay, but if they think that she's really with her aunt, why would they send her stuff to Ireland then? So Sade says like, okay, we need like some kind of official smoking gun to like pull this all together and something that will force the teachers to take us seriously. So then we go to part 2, which is called A Nightmare Scream. And it is Sunday. And so she spent the whole weekend basically with Baz looking for Elizabeth. And they know that she left the room after 10 p.m. that Monday night and could have used like a window or like a ladder to get out of the building. And they figure she didn't go past the school statue because it's like lit up with cameras there. So they like have searched the grounds. They're not finding anything. And they don't even know like what they need to be looking on. Or looking for. So Sade's like, okay, maybe like our first thing is like, maybe we can find her phone. So they also want to try to get into Hawkins' house, but like that house is really hard to get into because like the fourth years literally like guard the door and do not let them in. So they try to search the greenhouse again too because we know she liked biology, but the teacher won't let them in there either. So the academy students have really kind of like moved on from Elizabeth missing and no one else cares anymore. And they're now getting ready for the next big thing, which is the Owens Halloween/birthday party. And Baz asks if she thinks that Elizabeth is still alive. And he says like, this just all feels super sinister. And Sade doesn't answer and says like, let's just keep looking. And when she gets back to her room, she finds an invitation under her door. And inside is like an invitation with like a Japanese maple tree. And it says, you are invited to attend the Owens twins 17th Halloween party at Hawkins' house. And it's for April and August. And then Juliet knocks at the door and she's like the one passing out the envelopes. And she says, Persephone said thanks for the chocolate. And Sade asks like, hey, can I bring a +1 to this party? And she's like, well, who or whatever. And like, she's like, not a date, like just a friend. And she's like, oh, okay. Basically because she knows like somebody at this party likes her. So she tells Baz like, we're going to this party. And literally this is like the Met Gala of the school. Like it's super like special to be invited. So April spends like the rest of the week like interviewing students to see if like they're going to be allowed to come to the party. And Sade goes to the greenhouse with Baz again, and this time they're able to get in, and they don't find anything, but Baz can tell that someone has been watering the plants, which only Elizabeth ever did. So they go to see the biology teacher, and Sade says, like, Elizabeth watered, or basically the biology teacher says, like, you know, Elizabeth was the one watering it, but that would have been, at this point, it's been 3 weeks since she'd been missing, so, like, the soil wouldn't have been wet. And Baz wants to check the cameras to see, like, if maybe they'll catch something and see if she's still on campus. But Sade says, like, we can't just jump to conclusions and we just need to wait to go to Hawkins' house on Saturday. So Friday, her and Baz are, like, in his room and she's bleaching his hair for his Halloween costume. And she asks, like, if there's someone who can do her hair on campus because she has braids right now. And he tells her, like, there is a girl on campus that does hair. And she bleaches his hair, and she, like, literally, he combs it out, and, like, a piece comes out. And he's like, I can't be bald. I'll look like, I'll look like Dwayne Johnson. And sidebar, the other day, Carter comes in and goes, he's like, so he asked me something. He goes, something about Dwayne. And I'm like, who is Dwayne? And he goes, like, Shazam. And I said, The Rock? I told Josh, I said, it is unreal to me that these kids are calling him Dwayne. Because I'm like, who the hell is Dwayne? Dwayne Johnson? Like, I said, Carter, do you know that he used to be a wrestler? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, me and Josh were like, no, he didn't. And it's just crazy to me that, like, in my lifetime, growing up, this man was a wrestler, like, with, like, Stone Cold Steve Austin, like, all that. And now he's just, like, an actor. And, like, my son literally called this man Dwayne. And I was like, what? Like, what is going on here? Like, it's so strange. So, just a sidebar, because Baz also called him Dwayne Johnson, and I was like, it's just, like, my first instinct is to call that man The Rock. Like, it's weird.
Well, another sidebar, did you see that he came out with shampoo and conditioner?
No, he's bald, isn't he?
Yeah.
What's it called? Like, is it called anything funny?
Oh, gosh. Let me see.
And why? This must be one of those, like, I listened to this TikTok the other day, and it's like celebrities just get these investment deals, and people are like, can I use you on my stuff? And they don't really have anything to do with it. They just, like, get 50% or something for, like, getting, like, their face used or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, is this real? Like, is this one of those real things?
So it's, like Papatui or something like that. It's, I believe, like, a Hawaiian...
Interesting.
But it's a Target brand.
Oh. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is it gonna make me go bald? Yeah, I'm gonna pass on
it's skincare and men's shampoo.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. No, thank you. I'll pass. So anyways, Baz is like blonde now, and like only that one little piece of hair comes out, like he's good or whatever. And while they're in the room, like his roommate like comes in and kind of sneaks out the window to smoke, and like he's real sketchy. But after school that day, Sade goes swimming again, and August is like, every time she goes there, August is already there. Like that's all he does is swim. And he asks her to follow him to like the other swimming pool that's under construction. And there's a note, and or so she goes and like sees it or whatever, and then she goes back to her room, and there's a note and an apple left at her, and it says something sweeter, and it's from Persephone. So Jessica comes and says like, you should already be in your room, and like is like, this is your third strike, and she writes her up. Please find something to do. Please find you something to do. That is so. When I was in high school, I went to kind of like a boarding school. I went to the academy, and I literally got like grounded one time because our night lady used to like prowl the halls, and I think we had to have lights off at like 1 or something. Somebody called my phone in the middle of the night, and I answered it, and she like, I got in trouble for that. And like, that's not even a rule there anymore, but it's so stupid because I was like, I can sit up in my room all night and talk to my roommate, but God forbid somebody called me on the phone. And also like at the academy, we didn't have class every day. That's funny. They went to the academy. I went to the academy. But we had like college schedules. I don't think I even had class the next day. So like, leave me alone. And I never even served that grounding because I was grounded like, it was like over the weekend. Like you basically had to like, you couldn't get like extended curfew or something like that. I went home every weekend, so I never served that grounding. When I came back, it was gone, and I was like, there's that. Like, so this boarding school stuff, like that's not real. Like, write me up, I guess. Like, that's a joke. Get a life. So the whole dorms have like kind of been taken over with Halloween decorations, and Sade finds Persephone studying, and she like tries to study with her, but she just can't focus. And Persephone tells her, like, I don't really like parties. Like, I'm not really excited to go. And so Sade asks, like, how long have you known April? And she says, like, her, Jules, Juliet, and April all met, like, their first year. And they've been friends ever since. So her and Baz go get ready for the party. And they are going as Barbie and Ken. And they go to, like, Hawking's house, and there's a devil dressed up, like, letting them in the house. This house is huge. It is the mansion of all the houses. And, like, it's super well cared for, and, like, you can tell Hawking's house is, like, the favorite house. And, like, even the teachers are there, which I thought was kind of weird. Yeah. But the teachers are there, too. And April is dressed up like Sandy from Grease, and Francis is basically, like, I don't know what his name is in that movie. I haven't watched Grease in so long. Danny? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. I was like, Danny, okay. And August is dressed up like Spider-Man, but he looks like super unhappy to be there. And April, like, of course, does this big, like, introduction or whatever, and like smoke, and like this is April's party, like August is just born the same day basically. And then somebody like walks up to her and Baz, and she can't tell if he's dressed as Prince or Willy Wonka. And it's a boy named Kwame who Baz has mentioned before, like he likes him basically. And she can tell that Kwame like wants to know if they came as a couple, and Bass is just like super oblivious. So she's like we're just friends or whatever, and like leaves so they can have some time together. And then Captain America walks up, and it's Jude. Of course he's freaking Captain America. And Jude asks her like where's her kin, and she is like, he's somewhere or whatever. And Jude's like, oh, well, I could take him in a duel. And she's like, a duel? Like, are you gonna slap him with your glove? A duel? It's so old timey. And she says like, me and Baz are just friends. And Jude asks her like to play foosball, and he says, if you win, I get to take you on a date, and if I win, I get to take you on a date. And she's like, no. She says, if I win, I want a secret from you. And she can't stand how he like looks at her. It just makes her feel sick. And Juliet tells her like, okay, you have to win because Jude has like a huge ego, but she loses. And he says, I'll pick you up tomorrow at 8. And she notices August like slip out of the room, and see he just seemed like super off today. So she like gives April her gift, which is a pin. And literally April and Juliet shake the box and they're like, ooh, a pin. And I'm like, how do you even know that? And like, it's so weird. April is already like drunk, and like Persephone comes in before she can leave the room. And Persephone's like hair is red now because she's a blonde, and she's dressed as the Queen of Hearts. And she says like, I couldn't miss my best friend's birthday basically. And April says like, that's so sweet. Like, April says, that's so sweet I could cry, but unfortunately I had my tear ducts removed for my 16th birthday. And Sade says like, August has been off like all day, and she asks like where his room is, and everyone's like, why? Like, that's a super weird thing. And she's like, well, I just want to like check on him, like it's his birthday too. So she goes like to find him, but first she like takes time to search like each of the room or each of the floors. And when she gets to the 3rd floor, there's like some like guys dressed as gladiators, and they're like, why are you here basically? And she's like, oh, I'm looking for August. And they're like, well, what's his room number? And she did know his room number, so they like let her go or whatever. So she goes and knocks on his door, and he opens it like super pissed and goes like, I told you I don't know where, but then realize it's her. And he goes, oh, I thought you were Francis, sorry. He says April had like basically kind of like told on him to Maxine, which is their mother, and like basically he was kind of forced to like participate in this party tonight, but he doesn't want to be there. And Sade remembers like Maxine Owens is like a very popular jewelry brand, so like that must be like their mom, and that's why they're rich basically. So she looks at his room, and he has like a humongous room, bigger than hers, and he doesn't have a roommate. Him and his roommate, they share a bathroom. Like they have a connecting bathroom, but they have their own room basically. And she sees a black hoodie with a fish outline on it. But this one's different than the one in the like video because his also has like his last name and the number 13 on it. And he's like, oh yeah, like all the swimmers got this like hoodie like our first year or whatever. And she gives him his present, which is a pair of swimming goggles because he doesn't have any. And August like goes to get them drinks, and he leaves his phone, so like it like buzzes like continuously until it falls off like the counter. So she like pulls it up, and she sees like a group chat and someone called the fisherman. But August comes back, and she grabs like the drink from him, and then also like snags his key card and is like, oh, I have to go basically. So she goes to find Baz, who like can't figure out if Kwame likes him or not. And she's like, you're an idiot. Obviously he likes him. And so he's like, okay, be right back. And so she's like waiting around, and she sees a lost and found, and in it there's like a 4-leaf clover necklace with the name Connor on it, which makes her think of Elizabeth because Elizabeth had like clovers stickers on her shoes for like good luck. And then Baz runs back over saying like, gotta go, I kissed him, and like grabs her, and they like run out of the building. And she tells him that she has a date with Jude tomorrow. And Baz says, like, tomorrow we should go through everyone to try to figure out who, like, the TG person is. So the next day, there's a knock at her door, and she finds a bouquet of sunflowers and a note saying, like, I can't wait to see you tonight, and don't ask where we're going. So it's from Jude. And her and Baz are, like, going to go back to the Hawkins house in, like, 30 minutes. So it's, like, earlier in the day. So she goes and finds Miss Thistle and is basically like, I need the nurse or whatever. Like, I hit my knee. And she's like, okay, like it's across campus or something like that. And she's like, well, can you just give me like some pain medicine? And she's like, no, you need to see the nurse. And so she's like, okay, it's not my knee, like it's cramps. So Miss Thistle's like, oh, like I'll go over there and get it for you. Like, don't worry, I understand. So she takes this moment to like go through the files to look for like all the students and all the teachers for these initials. So there's no teachers with the initials TG. She starts finding like some of the students with those initials, but like they're first year. So she's like, okay, this probably isn't one of them. And then she stops on her file for a second, but Baz is like, okay, we gotta hurry up. Like, she'll be back any minute. And then she finds a file for a boy named Theodore something G. I can't remember what his last name was. And he is also the new president of the biology club. So they grab that file, and Miss Thistle like comes back and gives her the medicine. She also had grabbed Jude's file as she was like leaving. So Baz says that Teddy, or Theodore, was Elizabeth's arch nemesis, which she's like, that's real. Like, people have arch nemesis. And she's like, and he tells her like, basically he got Elizabeth demoted from the biology club president position. So the club meets on Mondays and Wednesdays at lunchtime. So they're like, okay, maybe we can go to one and confront him. And Sade wonders if they had been like hooking up too, since Baz doesn't even know everything about Elizabeth. And he tells her like, have fun in Paris tonight for your date, basically, like what he kind of said. So Jude shows up and he's like dressed pretty casual because she was worried because she didn't know what to wear. And she's taking her braids down now. So like she just has her hair in a low bun. And he tells her like, we're already signed out. He's a fourth year, so he can kind of do whatever he wants as long as he's back by curfew. And as they're leaving, he like slips the security guard money. And she's like, well, what's that for? And he's like, well, just in case we get back too late because the trains can be late, like getting to London. So they get on this train and like she still doesn't know where they're going. And he says, we're going to Paris. And she's like, what the hell? And he like laughs and he's like, no, I know the rumors. Like, he's like, I take people to Paris because I like Paris, not because I want to take them there and break up with them. And he basically tells her like, you're worthy of more than Paris and like, you're different than the other girls. And she flat out tells him like, that is not the flex that guys think it is when you're like, you're different than the other girls. So he says, okay, I'll take you to Paris next time, just like all the other girls. And she's like, I hate Paris. I don't want to go to Paris. So they get to like King Cross Station and they go to a museum and it's closed. And she's like, you should have checked the hours. Like, it's Sunday, it's closed. And he's like, oh, don't worry. And like the security guard comes and he has like a special access code and the security guard gives him the key and leaves them in this museum with like riches. Like, what the heck? And so she's like, okay, this guy is definitely a playboy. Like, he's obviously brought other girls here because, like, he knows the security guard. Like, this is not his first rodeo. But they go, and she actually, like, really enjoys it. And she's, like, super tired when they get back. And, like, instead of going through the security guard again, he takes her through a secret tunnel that has a keypad. And they enter out, like, they go through this tunnel and enter, like, right into the quad area. And he tells her the tunnel's only used by teachers and, like, sometimes by his team. And the password for the tunnel changes, like, every couple weeks. So they use this tunnel, and then he tells her, like, somehow she finds out that he has a fish tattoo, like the one on the hoodie, and also, like, his initials on it. And Sade says, like, basically, I had a nice time, and he's like, just nice. He's like, I'll have to do better next time. And she's like, who said there was going to be a next time? And he's like, go out with me again next week. And she tells him, I'll think about it. And when she gets to her room, there's a package at the door, and it has Elizabeth's name on it. So she opens it and there's a box of UV light bulbs. Like, that's it. And she puts together, like, okay, all these clues, like the fisherman, the music box, the light bulbs, like all this stuff. And she thinks that the fisherman August was texting is somehow connected to the fisherman. She had seen something like on the papers in the music box that said the fisherman. So Baz meets her at lunch the next day, and he says, like, maybe, like, the light bulbs are just, like, a routine delivery that didn't get canceled for Elizabeth. And she's like, okay, like, that could be possible. And, of course, he's eating freaking beans and toast, which I think is the nastiest thing. If we have any, like, English, UK, London listeners, one thing about London that I don't want is y'all food. Like, it looks so wet and unseasoned and soggy. What is it? What about beans says it should go on toast? And why do y'all eat like y'all are poor? That's a poor man's meal. Like, that's like a wish sandwich. Why do, like, people in England eat like they're poor? That's one country I don't ever want to eat in. Like, I don't want a single thing over there. Sorry for my tangent. But he was eating beans and toast and I was losing it. Anyways, so Jessica comes in because they're not in the cafeteria. They're like in the common area. And she's like, tells him like, I've told you before that you can't eat here. And he says, I've told you before to show me where that's written down. And she's like, I'll have you written up and like, then you'll get kicked out of the school and like blah, 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 blah. And he doesn't care. So they're like trying to work on their mission, like mission TG. And Persephone like goes to lit. They go to like lit class, and Persephone comes in, and she hasn't seen Persephone like since the party the other day. And the teacher tells them like he's gonna rotate their partners for the day, so like they can work with new people, which I would hate. Like, yep. I don't know why schools force group projects so hard. Stop it. So, like, they don't get to talk during that class. So Persephone says, like, I'll see you at lunch or whatever. But Sade's like, oh, like, I might be late because I'm going to go try out the biology club, which they're like, what? So they go to biology club, her and Baz, and the club, like, splits into two groups to work or whatever. And then, like, Theodore realizes that Baz is in, like, his group, and he's like, absolutely not. Like, I'm not letting the best friend of my sworn enemy into my group. And I'm like, you're in high school. Like, there's nothing about this that is that serious. Nothing. So Theodore also lives in Hawking's house, and like Sade can tell it because of the color of his tie. And so she asks him like about like one of the plants there, which he seems to like enjoy being asked about. And he like says like he doesn't like know much about it because like they're difficult plants. And basically she kind of lets it drop that like it's been getting watered and like that Elizabeth was caring for it, which kind of pisses him off. So after the club is over, they go up to Theodore and basically Baz is like, okay, let's call a truce. And Theodore is like, why? And he basically says like, it's not necessary. Like, this is not that serious. And so they ask like, why do you and Elizabeth hate each other? And Theodore said, like, it's not about the president position. Like, it's more than that. He said it's about the Science Expo, which is like a science expo that happens every year in Scotland. And basically, like, their first year, he wanted to go, but Elizabeth got picked. So he was like, good, fine, whatever. So then, like, the next year, he was, like, working on his project for months. And she, like, accidentally knocked his project over and destroyed it, he says. So, like, that's why their nemesis, basically. And he goes, well, karma came for her in the end, didn't it? She's not here anymore. So Sade's like, I mean, what does that mean? And she's like, is he admitting this? Like, should I be recording this or whatever? And she goes like, what did you do to her? Did you take her? And Teddy's like, what? He says, like, I just meant, like, you know, I told the teacher that she killed the hamster, so she got demoted, and I got to go to the expo this year. And he's like, I couldn't have done anything with Elizabeth because I was literally at the expo when she disappeared. And they, like, make him show them a picture of him at the expo. And he says, oh, by the way, I got third place, and Elizabeth never even placed top 5, so make sure you tell her that. And says, oh, by the way, Baz, like, never come back to my biology club. Mm-hmm. And Baz is like, I love you too. So they're like, okay, like, he's not TG, like, that's not him. So Baz doesn't feel good, and, like, he's like, I'm just not sleeping. And he's like, the only thing that helps me is, like, watching Shrek. So she's like, let's watch Shrek tonight. And Sade thinks, like, maybe the unholy trio will know who TG is. So she goes to meet them, like, at the end of lunch. And she asks, like, have you ever heard of something called the Fisherman? And April and Jules are like, no. But she sees Persephone kind of, like, stiffen. And she, like, drops her fork and, like, seems really weird. So after school, she finds Persephone in the library. And she says, like, we need to talk about the Fisherman. And Persephone, like, pulls her to the side and is like, first she's like, I don't know anything. But Sade's like, I know you're lying. So then she pulls her to the side and is like, you know, you can't just be accusing me of lying when you're asking random questions. Persephone says, like, I thought your roommate, like, left the school, basically. And Sade says she did, but it feels like there's something more to it, like something weird. And Persephone says, like, did you know that she used to be April's roommate? And she says, like, I don't know what happened with them, but, you know, she's like, I thought that they stopped being roommates over August, but she doesn't think that April would be like that petty, so she thinks there's more to it. And she tells Sade that Elizabeth and August dated for like a year and a half. So Jude texts her like at the same time and is telling Sade, you were swimming in my dreams last night. And I'm like, I hate this man. Like, you're disgusting. Please don't ever hit on anybody ever again. But Persephone sees her phone and she's like, oh, so like the rumor is true or whatever. And Sade says, like, no, we just, like, hung out that one time. And Persephone says, you should stay away from him. He'll break your heart. Like, basically, Sade is like, you know, oh, so you believe, like, all the rumors about him, like, messing with girls and all this stuff. And Persephone says, it's not a rumor. Jude used to date April and broke her heart, and April won't like you dating him. And Sade says, like, I can handle myself. So Persephone just leaves. And as she, like, comes back to the, like, library, she sees Baz sitting there, and he is, like, got all the snacks ready for their movie. So the next day at lunch, she doesn't go and sit with Persephone or the girls. Her and Baz like eat somewhere else. And he says like, I still can't sleep. Like I've just been worried about Elizabeth, and says like, maybe I can like get something from Jude. And she's like, what? And he says like, Judas, he's a drug dealer. Basically he sells pills. And Sade's like super shocked. And she's like, please don't like get any pills from him or whatever. And Baz says like, I don't know if I can keep like doing this. Like, and he starts crying. And Sade goes to leave, but he like kind of grabs her leg and says like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I'm having a meltdown basically. And outside of her room, when she does finally leave, she finds another bouquet of flowers from Jude. So she texts him and says like, you're getting good at this stalking or whatever. And he says like, let's meet at the cafe on campus tomorrow. So she goes to go swimming, and August is there. And he still calls her new girl. And so she's like, okay, if you keep calling me new girl, I'm going to start calling you Augustus. So he like dunks her in the water. And as she's coming up, he kisses her. And she's like, no, like, no, thank you. And like pushes him away. And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. But she like runs off. And when she gets back to her room, Persephone is sitting at her door. And Persephone says like, I'm sorry. Like, I don't mean to be controlling. And she like wants to talk about the fisherman. So they go in her room, and she asks Sade, like, where did you hear about it? Like, did you hear about it from August? And Sade, like, she, like, thinks, like, should she tell her or whatever? But she tells her the truth and says, like, I saw it on August's phone. And, like, she says Elizabeth, like, mentioned it, basically. So Persephone asks, like, do you think that's why she left? And Sade says yes. And so Persephone says, like, I want to help you, but I need you to get into August's phone. She basically wants to take an app and, like, clone his phone. And she says it'll show you, like, what the fishermen are and hopefully help Elizabeth. And so Sade says, like, why are you helping me? And Persephone says, I always help my friends. So the next day, she goes and meets Jude for their little, like, date or whatever. He says, like, you seem off today. He asked her, did she not like his flowers today, because he had sent her a bouquet of roses today. And she just goes, like, did you date April, or, like, did you guys just hook up? And he says, like, well, are we dating? And he doesn't answer her question. He says, I like you a lot, and I want to get to know you more, and I don't date a lot despite the rumors. And he's like, do you want to go steady with me? And again, is it, like, 1952? What are we talking about? And she says, you didn't answer my question. And like, he just kind of stiffens, and she's like, okay, like it's true or whatever. And so she's thinking like, okay, so everything Persephone said must have been true. And she just thinks, I am so sick of boys gaslighting me. So she leaves and says, see you around, Jude. So the next day in lit class, or it might be the same day, she is in a group, and this time she has to work with Persephone and Francis. And Francis is like, ooh, this will be the easiest A I've ever gotten. And Persephone says, you are literally a fourth year retaking this class so that you can graduate. And he says, at least I won't be single and bitter when I'm 30. And like, he's just like nasty to her. And Sade thinks like, why does April date somebody that treats her friend like absolute trash? So Francis is like, yep, well, I'm going to go smoke now, and just like walks out. And the teacher's like, where are you going? But Francis, like, he's like a higher up too, or like his dad or something is in the school too. Like, he never gets in trouble for anything. So after class, she goes to her free period, and August is there, and he looks super guilty. And he's like, I'm sorry, like, you're a good friend. And he's like, she's like, how did you find me? And he says, like, I used my head boy status and looked up your file. And he basically asked for, like, he asked his teacher if he could be 10 minutes late. And she's like, oh, like, you thought only 10 minutes was going to take to, like, win me back over, basically. And he's like, no, whatever. But she asked him, like, are you free tonight? And she lies and says, like, she wants to, like, finally try out for the swim team and for a reserve spot and wants his help. So she goes to the pool to, like, meet him. But first she sneaks into, like, the locker room and gets his phone. And she tries to unlock it. And the first time she tries his birthday, and it's not right. So then she tries his jersey number, and that's not right either. And there's only one more attempt left. So she remembers, like, him talking about like or when she went to his room, she saw like the Michael Phelps poster. So she tries 2004, which is like the year Michael Phelps like was really big or whatever at the Olympics, and that unlocks it. So the next week it's going to be their like campus holiday or whatever. So she's not going home. Obviously she doesn't have family, so she's going to be staying on campus. And then so is Baz. And Persephone like comes up to her and Baz saying like she got Sade's delivery, which was the copy of the phone. And now Baz's hair is blue, like he just keeps changing it. And Sade asks like, can Baz come and sit with us like at the table or whatever, which they let him. So at the lunch table though is like a bunch of random guys, like a whole bunch of swimmers, and August and Jude are there, even though August has not like been there since the whole kiss thing happened, and neither has Jude. And so Jude, like, as she's walking over, Jude looks directly at her and, like, slams on the table and jumps up and goes, I want to make an announcement to, like, the whole cafeteria. And he's like, I like someone a lot and I want them to know it, and I'm not used to not getting my way, but this girl challenges me. And he's like, I like Sade Hussein. And I was like, I would literally melt into a puddle.
Yep.
And that's what she thinks. She's like, I have never liked those like movies where like the guy professes his love and like never takes into consideration how the girl feels. Like, do not embarrass me like that. Do not do that. But he is like, okay, that's all. Like, everyone can go back eating. And April literally has no reaction to him doing this. But Persephone is like, looks like she's about to cry. And then Jude just like taps August and is like, we gotta go. Like, we got practice. And then Persephone leaves. So Sade apologizes to April, and April's like, I don't care who you date. Like, do whatever you want or whatever. She's like, I'm with Francis. So Sade realizes, like, okay, it wasn't April. It was Persephone who cared if I dated him. So she goes to Persephone's room, and she's like, we need to talk. And she's like, okay, what's the deal, basically? And Persephone cries and says, Jude is a rapist. And all she can say is, like, I'm sorry to Persephone. So Persephone changes the topic and says, like, she went through August's phone. She said there wasn't much under his pictures and his messages, but she decided to look to see if he had a hidden app, and he did. He had a messaging app that was like hidden. It looked like a calculator. And so basically what we find is disgusting. Basically, it's a group of boys in this messaging thread, and they are talking about, like, there's different threads for like different girls at the school. There are like nude pictures, like all kinds of video, like stuff for all of these girls. And like each one of them is like locked, and each boy in here, like, they're not in there by their actual name. They all have like nicknames, but they're able to figure out that Jude's nickname is Jack the Ripper. Are you joking? Is this real? Boys are disgusting, because they literally will know that their friend is like a disgusting monster and won't bat an eye. And that kills me. So Jude is in the phone as like Jack the Ripper, and he literally is like telling them like everything he said at lunch is like not real. Like, he basically just wants to have sex with Sade. Like, that's his end goal. And he's like, she's like a prude, and like she keeps like not giving me any action on the dates or whatever, but he's going to keep trying. And Persephone like starts talking about what happened to her, and she's like, it happened the end of first year. And she said that April wasn't dating Jude yet, but he like would like look at April and look at her, and like made her like super uncomfortable. So one night he comes up to Persephone and like gives her a drink, and he tells her like, one day I'll get you and I'll make you turn straight. Vomit. And like ever since that day, she's just been terrified of him, and like she just felt like super weak and powerless. And then right after that, he started dating April, and like it's like he never went away. He was always around. And other girls like who have been with him say like they can't remember the night they spent with Jude, but it's like basically it's all rumors, so like no one has ever reported anything. So Sade has been sleepwalking like more and more since all this stuff is going on. And we learned that Persephone also isn't going home over the break. So she's been hanging out with her more. So in her room, she keeps hearing this like beeping sound. And then all of a sudden a black envelope like slides into the door, and it has like a fish on it. So she knows that beeping must have been like the typing of the Morse code. And she opens the door, but there's nobody there. And she like searches what the Morse code means. And it says, rats that squeal become a meal. And it's also an invitation to the Hawkins soiree. And it also says, like, remember not to squeal on it. And it says, like, TFM as the signature, which is the fisherman. Oh, okay. So she wonders, like, okay, like, did Elizabeth squeal because, like, there was that rat at their door? So she looks at her phone, and she has a message from Jude that says, like, you may receive something, but don't be alarmed. It's just my birthday invitation. And she hasn't heard from him, like, since the whole, like, proclamation of his love, basically. And he says, like, the Morse code is a Hawkins tradition. That's why they use it. And so she wonders, like, how did Elizabeth get invited to a Hawkins party? Because they're so, like, special or whatever. And she didn't know Jude well enough to, like, get invited. So maybe it was August. And Persephone is like, okay, decline the invitation. Like, nothing good ever happens from going to those parties. And, like, says, like, you saw the messages. Like, you saw what they were saying about you. But Sade says, like, what if we can use it to, like, get the information we need to prove what's going on? And then Baz busts into the room because he was, like, they were supposed to watch Shrek 2. And Persephone's like, does he not knock? But he's like, he still can't sleep or whatever, but he sees them. He's like, oh, like, I'll be back. Like, I see I interrupted. So now it's 3 days into the party, and Jude says, I know that you've been planning like something and it won't work. And she's like, oh my God, like, am I caught, basically? And he says, I know you're getting me a surprise gift. And I'm like, okay, first of all, how disgusting are you? Like, if I was, like, I wouldn't get it now because how, like, mighty to think of yourself. So he offers to pick her up on Saturday, and Baz is like, what was that about? And she tells him about the invitation to the party, and he's like excited that she got invited because he doesn't get to invite it to those. And she hates that she can't take him, but she's going to have like a plan with Persephone. And then she gets an email from an unknown like email, and it says, stop digging, you'll only get hurt. And it's a burner address. And she tries to like email back and say, who is this? But the email bounces. But she doesn't want to tell Persephone about the email because she thinks like she'll think it's too dangerous and she'll bail from everything. So she decides to go ahead and go, like, get her hair braided. The girl's name is Shauna. And she braids her hair in 6 hours. She gives her these waist-length faux locks. And I was like, okay. And only charged her $80. Like, that was insane. But, okay, Shauna. So she goes to see Persephone after she, like, gets her hair done. And at first, Persephone, like, doesn't, like, smile or anything. And then she's like, oh, your hair looks nice. So Sade decides to wear a blazer over her dress to the party because it has pockets in it, and she's going to like record basically. And the party is at Jude's house, so it's off campus. And the first person she sees when she gets there is August, and she immediately is like, ugh, no thank you. And she thinks like it's not fair for me to assume like that he's like disgusting, but he also is friends with Jude, and he knows about all these like messages and stuff, so he's still like guilty. And August says, like, Jude's been looking everywhere for you. And he's like, I didn't know you guys were dating. And he says, et tu, Sade? And then he's like, I wouldn't have kissed you if I knew you were spoken for. First of all of these things, like, there's a lot to unpack here. Like, no, I'm not dating him. And two, you still shouldn't have kissed me.
Right.
Like, no. So she goes and finds Jude, and he's, like, been drinking. He smells like beer. And he's like, where's my present? And I'm like, I'm going to give you a freaking present, all right? And that's what she says. She's like, I'll give it to you later. And Jude is like, you know, let's play a game like with everyone. And he's like, let's play Never Have I Ever. And when it's his turn, he literally says like, never have I ever given a guy blue balls after a date. And he like turns to her and is like, drink up, new girl. And everyone's like giggling or whatever. And she's super disgusted by him. And then he's like, okay, like let's go to like my room. So they go up there, and she's like staring out the window, and he's like, are you planning your escape? And I'm like, do you feel like I need to escape from you?
Right.
Like, why do you keep saying these cringy things? And she sees a picture of like him and his mom, and he talks about her a little bit, and his mom is literally like a countess. And so he gives her a drink, and she sniffs it. He's like, it's just blue lemonade. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not drinking nothing you give me. But he asks, like, you know, is dating kind of like against your religion? He's like, I'm not like trying to be like a jerk. Like, I really just don't know. He's Catholic. And she's like, no, like, I don't want to date. And he tells her, like, she looks really good tonight. And he's like, unfortunately, I don't see you most nights. And he asks for his present again. And he's like, you should kiss me. And he like starts groping her. And he says, like, I just want to have fun. And so she reaches in her pocket and turns off the recorder. And she's like, you know, I can have fun or whatever. So she pushes him, like, back. And he's like, what are you doing? But then, like, realizes, like, she pushed him into his hammock. And he's like, oh, like, you like swings or whatever. I hate you. And he says, like, don't you get tired of, like, this little goody two-shoes act? And he's like, I know about you in August. And she's like, first of all, what was me in August? And then she says, it's not an act. Like, maybe I just don't like you. And he says, sometimes, like, you look strange and you scare me. And he gets, like, really confused. And she's like, oh, the fun is starting. And she's like, the fun will start the next morning when you can't remember anything. And he tries to stand up and, like, he gets really nauseous. And he starts to realize something is wrong. And he calls her, like, Jamila. And then she leaves the party. So she goes to get in the car with Persephone, and Persephone's not in the car. So she's like, okay, where the hell is she at? But then Persephone comes, like, running out, and she's like, well, I went inside because, like, the app, like, recording thing shut off, and she's like, I didn't know if you were hurt. And she starts to tell her, like, what happened and that the mission failed, but she realizes, I left my freaking blazer and the phone in Jude's room. So she goes back, and she, like, immediately finds her stuff, and she sees somebody passed out in the room, and it's Jude, and he's blue. He's dead. And we get, like, throughout this book, there's, like, these little, like, interludes or whatever. And, like, I hadn't really paid a lot of attention to them until now. But this one basically is, like, I'm glad he's dead. We go to part 3, which is clipped wings, and Sade thinks like this wasn't the first dead body that she had ever seen. She remembers finding her mom in the tub, like dead, when her mom overdosed. The water had been running like over, and she had tried to like wake her mom up, but when she touched her, like she just like sank under the water and she started screaming. And so she runs like from Jude's room, like before anybody can see her, and she's crying when she gets to the car, and Persephone's like, what happened? And she says, Jude's dead. And Persephone drives off, and she's like, we can't go back to the school like this, like, and it's past curfew. So they get a hotel. And Persephone had, like, rented this car. Like, it was super weird. But they go to the hotel, and they have to share a queen bed. And Sade's like, okay, like, he's dead. Like, what do I do? Like, they're going to think I did it. And they just kind of, like, get in bed for the night. And Persephone says, I know this is really wrong, but, like, I just felt super relieved when you told me that he was dead. And so they go back to school the next day, and Persephone says, like, you know what? It's going to be chaotic. Like, there were so many people there and, like, so much going on. Like, they're not even going to know that you were there. And as they go to check in, Miss Thistle says, like, you know, where are you guys coming from? And she says, like, there was an incident, basically. And so the headmaster wants them to, like, document where everyone's coming from. So Persephone says, oh, like, we went to, like, my uncle's party because, like, Sade still has her dress on from the night before. And Sade is, like, panicking. And she's like, you know, like, I don't know what's going to do. So she goes to her room. And, like, it's just now, like, the end of break. Like, this all happened over the holiday break. So she decides to go swimming because, like, she's been avoiding it all week because she doesn't want to run into August, but, like, it's the only thing that helps her. And so she gets in the pool and she's, like, leaning, like, back floating. And she's so tired that she literally starts to, like, fall asleep and starts, like, sinking under the water. And then she, like, panics and she, like, comes up, but then she sees something in the water and it's Jude's body. So she's, like, hallucinating again. And this time they play another one of the interludes, and I realize it is a, like, diary entry, and whoever's writing it is, like, basically, like, they told me I was a liar, they called me a liar. So the headmaster calls an assembly and basically tells everyone about Jude and says, like, the police are going to be back on campus, everyone's on lockdown, nobody in, nobody out. And April, August, and Francis, like, don't come to lunch that day. Baz is pissed at, like, how they're all doing all this stuff about Jude, but they literally did nothing about Elizabeth. And at this point, Sade is scared to go swimming, and she's like, I need a new swim partner, so she asks, like, Baz to go with her. So he does, and they're, like, swimming around for a little bit, but of course, August shows up, but he looks terrible. So she goes back to her room, and one of the UV lights is now, like, screwed in, and she can see all of this writing on the wall, and it basically is, like, the fishermen are all rapists. It has, like, different boys' names and, like, their chat names. And she knows that Elizabeth was putting this together to expose them. So she goes to Persephone's room and she, like, isn't there, but her roommate's like, oh, she must be at dinner. Like, you can come in. So she gets on Persephone's computer and she finds a file called, like, the John Fisher's Men. And basically there's pictures going through, like, all of these Hawking photos. And then she starts to see April in some of the pictures. And she wonders if the Hawking parties are just, like, a cover for them to, like, get girls over and rape them. And she wonders if April knows because, like, obviously her brother and, like, she's always at the party. So her roommate asks, like, are you Persephone's girlfriend? And then Persephone comes in and Sade is like, you know, we need to show a teacher this. But Persephone says, no, we have to wait and, like, confirm, like, our information. So there's a picture from, like, girls in this, like, chat of them, like, it's basically like nudes, like, getting leaked. And Sade tells Persephone about the email from Elizabeth's aunt that wasn't really from the aunt. And also how Baz had, like, found his phone and, like, about the app tracking Elizabeth's phone and all of that. So they go back to her room and Baz comes in and she shows him, like, the writing on the wall. And he's like, who sent the light bulbs? And she doesn't know. But Persephone notices, like, on the app for Elizabeth's phone that it also shows the direction in which the person was headed when they were walking. And she had been headed to see August, like, towards where he normally is. So the next day, there's another assembly. And this time they're told that Jude's death is being treated as a murder. And they are going to be holding a memorial for him tomorrow. And she hears, like, she hangs behind at the end of the assembly and she hears the headmaster talking to the police and basically, like, they want to keep this, like, on the hush, like, you know, the drugs are not a good thing. And Jude's body had been, like, filled with drugs. And so it's a scandal, but one of the drugs was the roofie drug. So at the memorial, like, people are crying and, like, actually seem sad versus, like, that visual they did for Elizabeth. And August gets up and speaks, and, like, the whole swim team is with him, and they, like, dedicate the pool or something to Jude, and they, like, throw, like, some kind of little balls inside or whatever. So April's like, you know what, I can't handle this, like, I need to get drunk. And she seems really detached. So they all plan to go to Sade's room because she doesn't have a roommate. So she's like, okay, I gotta hide, like, the light bulb and, like, the writing on the walls. So she goes and asks Jessica for a light bulb, and Jessica's like, I mean, they're on the first floor, but I'll give you some. But when she gets to her room after that, there's a rat out there again. So she, like, picks it up and throws it away, which, hell no. Heck no. I can't handle it. I can't do any, like, I've had to catch, like, mice and stuff in my house. I can't handle it. That thing would still be sitting here. I would be so sick. Blech. So the girls come over, and, like, we find out their classes are canceled for the rest of the week. And August texts her, and, like, he's basically drunk. So she's like, okay, like, the girls are drinking in her room. So she's like, I'm going to go check on him. So she goes to the pool, and he's, like, floating in the pool, but he has a drink. And he says, like, hello, girl, like, 1,000 something that, like, slept with my friend. And he goes, just kidding. Jude said you were a prude, basically. And she's like, what's wrong with you? Like, you're being super different. And August says, like, where did you go that night? And he's like, you know, I had seen you, like, you were with Jude, and, like, I saw you guys leave, and then you just kind of disappear. And he's like, I think you might have even been the last person to see him alive. And she's like, no, I wasn't. And he says, I think you were. And so she leaves. And when she gets back to her dorm, Jessica and Miss Blackburn and, like, all the security people are there. And she's like, what the hell happened now? And Juliet is, like, on the floor, passed out, like, pale. Not dead, though. And Persephone is, like, looking at her, is, like, super judgmental looking. April doesn't look like anything. But they all go to the hospital, like, with Juliet. So anyway, so they take Juliet to the hospital, and they found the same roofie drug in Juliet's system. And then, like, what we find out is that she had like, a migraine, and she went to go take medicine. She thought it was, like, ibuprofen or something, but it ended up being the roofie drug. So, like, okay, Sade, why is that in your room? And so, like, Sade feels like this is all my fault. So when they get back, like, April is like, you know, I'm going to go find Francis or whatever. So Persephone's like, let me walk you to your room. And then when they get to Sade's room, she's like, can I come inside? And so when she gets inside, she goes, like, why was that drug in your room? And she's like, I know the same drug was found in Jude. And so she's like, basically, like, did you do it? And she tells Persephone, like, you should go. And Persephone says, like, I'm not going anywhere. Like, I need answers. I need to know if I need to call my parents. Do I need to call a lawyer? And Sade says, like, I'm so sorry. Like, it's just so much to explain. And Persephone is basically like, take your time. So we learned that Sade had a sister. And I felt like they said they were twins, but they couldn't have been twins. I wonder if that was just, like, how she, like, felt.
She did say that they were twins.
But then she was older than her. But I was like, do you just mean, like, minutes? Or, like, was she... I was confused about that part.
I think maybe she meant, like...
Minutes.
Okay,
yeah. So, Sade had a twin. And her twin's name is Jamila. So 2 years ago, she was living in a townhouse in London with her father and her sister. And her sister, like, was, like, super into schoolwork. Like, that's how she kind of dealt with, like, everything, like, with their mother being dead, all that stuff. And she feels like her father was, like, had basically killed their mom, like, you know, from cheating on her and things like that. And he never lets them, like, leave the house. And basically, Jamila gets, like, the approval to go to a school. And she's pissed because she's like, what do you mean? Like, you're going to leave me? And, like, how come you get to go? And so, like, that kind of ruins their relationship. But Jamila goes to school, and then she comes back completely different. She, like, doesn't stay, like, the whole time. She's, like, ruined. Her grades are slipping. She, like, looks super, like, skinny and, like, just looks terrible. So she hadn't talked to her sister the whole time she had been at school. And when she came back, like, they just start talking again, and she hangs out with her, like, they're just like old times, and she feels complete again because her sister's back, and, like, they even sleep in the bed together. And the next morning she wakes up, and her sister is not there. And she, like, looks around for her, and she finds a note in her handwriting, and the note just says, I'm sorry. And she looks, and the garden doors are open, and she runs outside, and she finds Jamila dead in the lake. And she tries to get her out, but she just can't. So the police have to come. They get her body out. And her father had been, like, off on a trip. And he comes home and immediately starts blaming her. And was like, all you had to do was, like, one job. And I'm like, how is this possibly her fault? Like, I'm sorry I went to sleep. So she just, like, you know, loses it basically. And so she starts having nightly visits from Jamila, which also Jamila is the girl that she keeps seeing. Like that's the girl she kept seeing. And she's like asking her like, who did this to you? And so she decides like, I'm going to find out who it was. Cause she can't even like cry. She's so distraught over this. So she's like, I'm going to solve this. So she goes to Jamila's room and she finds a diary. And she like, so she starts writing in the diary. She's like, oh, I met a boy. And then like, there's a lot of time that's missed. And then the entries start again. And she's like talking about how she can't sleep. And she writes about how her and Sade don't speak. And then she says, I think I was raped. So Sade goes to her dad's office because her dad keeps files on everyone, including his kids. And she finds the file on Jamila. And we learned that Jamila had been kicked out or like removed from the school that she was at. And the school that she was at was the Nightingale Academy or whatever, which was the team that Juliet had played and that had made Sade like feel all weird when she saw them. And where that girl was like, do I know you? And so she was kicked out from that school. And at some point in time, they had found drugs in Jamila's system and that she had said that Jude had raped her. And so Sade decides, I'm going to find him. So Sade tells Persephone that Jude had drugged her sister and raped her and basically is the reason that her sister is dead. She says she had spent like the last 2 years researching everything that she could about Jude. And she's like, I didn't want him to die though. Like I just wanted like revenge. And so Persephone hugs her. Like, she's not mad at all. She's like, I completely understand. And she's like, Sade's like, the police must be like closing in. Like, if everybody else is figuring this out. And Persephone's like, you're not going to go to prison. She says, I overheard them talking about Jude and the drugs aren't like his cause of death. Like, he was drugged, but it wasn't his cause of death. So Sade did drug him. And also the reason that Juliet found the drug was because like Sade had it in her room. And Persephone says, like, we have all the information. Like, we just need to expose it to the public. And then we get that little, like, interlude again. And it just says, Dear Diary, I'm bleeding out inside. So they decide to make a website. So Persephone, Sade, and Baz, they decide to make a website. And they're just going to, like, make it untraceable because Kwame, like, is able to do that. He works in tech. And they're going to put all the information on the website. So they're like in class and literally it goes live and everyone's phone's like Bing in class. And all like the rest of that day, all of the like students that they exposed, the fishermen, are like called down to the headmaster's office. And like she goes swimming because she feels like I won. Like, you know, like I feel like I'm finally like something's lifted off my spirit. And August comes in and he's like, he wasn't really exposed because he really didn't participate in the chat. There was only like one little thing about Elizabeth in there. He had shared a picture. And he says that, you know, he's here to see Sade, and he like asks about the night with Jude, and he's like, you know, I saw you go to his room twice. And Sade says like, why did you lie about dating Elizabeth or sending the email? And she's like, what did you do to her? And August says, you don't know what you're talking about and you're hiding something. And Sade just says like, you have weak threats and you're a weak boy, basically. So she leaves and goes to get Baz to see if he wants to go to dinner. And he seems super off too. And he just says like, I'm just so tired. And I feel like Elizabeth has been like forgotten in the middle of all this. And she hasn't told him about what she found on the message thread, which was August had sent like a picture or a video of Elizabeth in that thread also. And he like, she just can't tell Baz that. So she gets a message from Persephone saying like, there's an emergency at April's house. April's at Franken's house. I was like, I can't remember what it was. And she's like, don't bring Baz, like, come now. So she runs over there and, like, goes to April's room, and there's, like, a body on the bed. And she's like, what the hell? Like, another person? It's Elizabeth. They found Elizabeth. So April says, I can explain. She says that basically Elizabeth was in the bunker in their basement of the house. So under the Franken house, there's, like, these hidden bunkers that some people don't know about. And April would go down there for like quiet time. And she's like, she was down there and she was like super sick and pale looking. And April says Elizabeth doesn't want us to call the police or anybody. But everyone else is like, okay, no, she looks terrible. She has to go. Like, we have to call. So they like get Miss Blackburn and they call like for first aid. And April's just like weird. Like she's just super calm and like collected throughout this whole thing. And so Sade calls Baz and is like, you have to get over here. And he rushes over here, but like right as they're like loading Elizabeth into like the stretcher. so he's like, can I go with her? Can I see her? And Miss Blackburn's like, no. And he's like, you know what? You have some nerve, because he's like, this is all your fault. He's like, I've been telling you guys for weeks that she was not at home, that she was missing, and like none of you guys cared. And so like at first Miss Blackburn kind of wants to like snap on him, because he's like, you like have some nerve or whatever. But after he says that, like, she knows that he's right, basically. So she's like, look, we'll keep you updated. Like, everyone just go back to their dorms. So then we jump ahead 2 days. It's been 2 days, and there's no update on Elizabeth. And the school has another emergency assembly to update, like, them. And really what it's about is the website. So they're basically like, the headmaster's like, we want whoever's behind this website to come forward, because they're doing more harm than good. And like some random person is like, so it's less concerning to you that there's all these like rapists on campus than the fact that there's a website like exposing them. Like, yeah, that basically. And then they also say like they're still interviewing students from like the party at Jude's, and April is asked to stay behind. And Sade's like, I don't know, like, what's going on? Like, they still haven't interviewed me. And Persephone's like, it might not be, like, maybe no one said you were there. But Sade knows that August knows she was there, and, like, he's been threatening her. So she knows, like, that he can tell on her. And then she does get called in. So before she goes, like, she goes to the bathroom, and she's like, I have to calm down. And in the bathroom stall, like, someone had literally scratched on the wall, like, a fish and, like, a name of somebody else calling them a rapist. I think his name was Michael. So Persephone, like, is sitting outside the office when Sade gets there, and she's like, what are you doing here? And Sade's like, I got called down. And Persephone's like, no, like, you're not on the list. And then all these police step out, and they literally arrest Sade and say she's under arrest for the suspicion of murder. So the bell goes off at this exact same time too. So of course, every student like sees her being arrested, and she like gets sent down to the station, and Miss Blackburn gets sent with her to like be her legal guardian. And they basically asked, like, did she go to the party? And she said no. And they're like, well, we were told that you were there. And they said that we were told you were dating June and you were the last one seen with him. And she's like, no, none of that's true. And they're like, witnesses said that you guys had an argument before, and that, like, we found like your DNA on him, basically. And they're like, we have to keep you if you're not going to cooperate. But if you do, like, we can let you go, blah, blah, blah. But then a police officer comes in and is like, we have somebody else, let her go. We have evidence. And it's August. So they have arrested August. And surprisingly, when she gets released, she finds that Persephone and Baz are waiting for her. And she feels like super loved. Like, she has people now. And she wonders, like, why is Baz here and not with Elizabeth? And they tell her, like, Elizabeth is awake, but she asked for you. So she goes to see her, and Elizabeth says, like, I know you didn't kill Jude. And Sade's like, you spoke to the police? And she's like, what happened? So we kind of jump to Elizabeth's POV, and we go back an entire year. So at this point, Elizabeth and August have been dating for a year, but only in secret, because basically it was an embarrassment to August to like be known if he was like dating her. So he can't date her in public. And so poor Elizabeth, like, she's, probably her self-esteem's down. Like, she's going along with this. And she finds out that, like, August has been, like, taking pictures of her and, like, videos of her and, like, without her permission. And then one of them gets leaked. And she's like, I'm on scholarship. Like, this could ruin everything for me. And he's like, oh, like, it's not a big deal. Like, it'll die down. And she's like, how did it even get leaked? And he's like, oh, like, my phone must have got hacked, or, like, maybe Jude saw it. And she's like, no, you sent it to Jude, didn't you? And so he's like, you know what? Like, let's just take a break or whatever. And it's really, like, that really hurts Elizabeth. Like, she really loved him. So she goes down to the bunker, and she meets April down there. And April asks if, like, she's upset with something about her brother. And she, like, doesn't want to tell her this yet. So she doesn't say anything. And August moves on super fast. Like, he's already hooking up with, like, a girl on the swim team. But pretty much everyone, like, very quickly forgot about her picture that was leaked or whatever, except for Jude, who has now been, like, hanging around her super tough. And she basically decides, okay, I'm going to entertain Jude to, like, get back at August. But she immediately regretted it, because he's, like, nothing like August. And we learn that August is referred to as the gentleman on the swim team. So he is TG, the gentleman. So she missed August, but she, like, keeps hooking up with Jude. And then she gets an invite to the Hawkins party, which was in the Morse code. And at that party, she goes to Jude's room, and basically he roofies her. And she, like, went all hazy, and, like, he gets on top of her, and she can barely see and barely move. And August, like, busts in, and he's like, what is going on? And Jude just says, like, isn't it obvious or whatever? And she literally couldn't move until the next morning. And some random guy just like came in the room and was like, she was by herself, half naked. And the guy's like, hey, like you need to get dressed and like leave, basically. And so then she can kind of remember August like asking like, how could you do this? And she remembers that her aunt who had cancer had been on a med that did like similar stuff to her. And so she's like, starts Googling like, was I drugged? How do I know if I was drugged? Because she doesn't remember taking anything. And so she sees August and she tries to speak to him, but he doesn't want to talk to her now. He's like super disgusted. And he tells her, sleeping with my friend isn't mature. And she's like, I didn't sleep with Jude. And he's like, I saw you. So she goes to her room, but like April and Jude are in there because April's dating Jude at this time. So she just leaves. And she tries to run to Baz, but she doesn't want to burden him with information. So when he asks what's wrong, she says like, I just failed a biology test. And so she tries to tell the headmaster, and he goes, well, like, you know, I'll investigate it, but, you know, you shouldn't be attending parties like this. It'll risk your scholarship and your future. And she's like, excuse me? And he says, Jude's mom is basically on the board, so she can have your scholarship revoked. So, like, basically you need to decide, like, is it worth reporting this information? So she's pissed. And she feels super small. So she like turns to online forums and she finds like other people to relate to. And one day she comes across a post by somebody named like PB something. And they basically have said, I wish that Jude Ripley was dead. And so this is the first time she's ever interacted on the forum and she like comments on it. So she starts hacking like the group that August is in because he basically has the same passwords for everything. And she like gets all the information and she wants to expose the Hawkins parties. And she knows she would miss April, but she knew she like had to move out because April's August's sister. So April's like, where are you going? Like, why? And she assumes it has something to do with August. And Elizabeth says, no, like it's not just him. April says like, I care about you. And Elizabeth says, like, how can you care about me when you don't want anyone to know that we're friends either? And she tells her, like, you need to break up with Jude. Like, he's not a good person. And she can't tell April everything. So April just goes like, oh my God, like the rumors are true. You did sleep with Jude. And she's like, no, I didn't. April says, she says, with friends like you, who needs enemies? And she tells Elizabeth, like, I want you gone, like now. So that's why they don't live together anymore. Elizabeth starts like getting really like close and like good friends with the person on the forum, and she had been messaging them for a long time, and then one day they just stopped responding and they just disappeared. So we go to 7 weeks ago. This is still Elizabeth, and at this point Elizabeth had like compiled enough information to expose everybody. And like one day she's like walking through campus and someone just calls her a slut, and the girl says like, you've been hooking up with my boyfriend, and shows her a picture on her phone of Elizabeth that she knows August took. And she's like, I don't even know your boyfriend. Like, I have no idea how he got that picture. And then she goes to biology and the hamster falls out of its cage and dies. And so then Theodore like couldn't wait to tell on her. And that's when she got demoted from president. And she goes like, tries to talk to August and she's like, I need to talk to you. So then a week goes by and she is like at the cat cafe in town. And like, she's really ready to expose everything. And she starts writing in like a invisible pen that can only be seen with the UV light so that she doesn't lose any of her information. And August just now replies a week later and she says, I know about the fisherman and I'm like, basically it's going to blow up in your face. And then we go to 4 weeks ago, which is when Miss Blackburn told her like Sade was coming, and she meets Sade and she is shocked because she says, this is my friend from the forum. And she's like, but it can't be her because like she doesn't say anything, like she doesn't recognize me. And so she starts showing Sade like around the school, and she gets an email from like a college that she wants to go to. And it's basically saying like, we need to review like your application or like something. And she's like, what are they talking about? And then she gets a message saying like from an unknown person saying, fuck with us and we'll ruin your future. And it has like the picture attached to it that August like had sent the group or whatever. So then she goes to her room and she sees the rat. And like for the rest of that day, she kept getting messages like that. And like that, Sade had noticed it like that first day too. So she texts April and is like, meet me in the bunker. And she goes and basically tells her like, Jude raped me and like, that's what August saw. And April just goes like, okay, like, why are you telling me? Like, what can I do about it? After she had met with April, she decides like, I'm gonna confront them. So she heads towards the pool, and she sends Baz the message with all the sandwiches, so like he would know something was up. And she knew that there weren't cameras like in the pool area because it's under construction and all this stuff. So she was looking for August, but she didn't find him. First she finds Jude, and then she finds August like with Jude. And Jude basically says like he knew that she like had come to confront them, so he like grabs a recorder out of her pocket and smashes it. And August is like, Elizabeth, like, I'm not the bad guy. And she asks, like, why would you share, like, these pictures? Like, that's assault. And he's like, really, assault? Like, that's dramatic. Like, no, that's illegal. That is a crime. Yeah, that's a crime. And so she tries to tell August, like, about the stuff with Jude, and he's not believing her. And Jude says, like, you wanted it. Like, and he starts pushing her, and so she pushes him back. And she calls him a rapist and a coward, and he, like, charges at her and, like, slams her into the wall and, like, is choking her. And August is like, Jude, like, what the hell? Like, stop. And Jude says, like, you will always fail, basically. And August is like, what is wrong with you? Like, why would you do that? And Jude says, like, I'll kill you, basically. And he starts like fighting with August basically, and she falls down into the hole that's meant for the pool and like smacks her head. And so she's like going in and out, and August is like, oh my God, she's hurt. And Jude's like, we have to go, like, just leave her. August says we can't leave her. And Jude is like, we have to. And then like, it sounds like they turn like the concrete on, like one of the machines, like they're planning on burying her in concrete. And she passes out. And then she wakes up in a shower, and that's the next thing she knows. And she hears April talking, asking like, what was going on. And actually she heard April before she passed out. And then she wakes up and she's in a shower, and she hears April saying like, what is wrong with you, August? And like saying, I'll just take care of it like I always do. And basically is like, we can send Liz home like in a car, like get this done like quietly. And she gets out of the shower and basically tells April like, you can't just ship me off. So she tells Sade, back in like present time, she tells her like, I thought I was dead. But basically, April had been hiding her down in this bunker, basically. So Elizabeth had been down in this bunker, and she says like August has something to do like with what happened to Jude. And so basically she had told the police like that it was August. And Sade's like, do you really think it was August? And she's like, I don't know. I just think he has like something to do with it. So Sade thinks like we should just go above the headmaster and go to like the board and make these reports. And so she decides like when she gets back to her room, like she just goes to like all these different news stations or whatever and sends them a link to the news outlets or to her website for the news. And so like the next day they go to lunch, and August is just like sitting there, just eating, like he didn't get arrested for murder. But he's back. And Baz comes in and says, like, they caught the killer, and it was April. She confessed. So April has confessed to killing Jude and also being behind the website. And Persephone is like, okay, like, there has to be more to this. And Kwame comes in, like, to Sade's room because that's where they're all hanging out. And he's looking for Baz, but he's not there yet. And he has a copy of the police transcript from when April turned herself in. So the transcript basically says, April was saying like Jude had tried to hurt her, and so she was like trying to defend herself, and she strangled him. And Jude was strangled, but they're like, okay, well, your hands are smaller than the hand marks that are on his neck, basically. And she's like, well, I wore gloves. And I'm like, that wouldn't change the size of your hands, but okay. And so Kwame gets those records, and Sade looks at the files for April, Jude, and August. And then she sees a picture of April from like one of the Hawkins parties, and she can tell that April had been drugged too. So Sade confronts April about everything. And April's just like sitting in her room, like painting her toes, because April's rich and her dad's like a lawyer or something. So like, they're like, okay, April must have just confessed because she knew she would like get off, basically. Mm-hmm. So she goes and like confronts April, and she basically says like, I know who killed Jude. It was Francis. And she thinks that Francis killed Jude about like a drug deal because Jude was selling drugs, Francis was selling drugs, and like supposedly Francis got it from Jude. And April says like, you don't know the half of what you think you know. And Sade says, I know that you care about and helped Elizabeth. And April says like, please just get out of my room. So she leaves, and Sade runs into Francis, and she immediately like wants to like run away. But he says, is April okay? He basically says to Sade like, I know that you know, and that April had texted him and told him. And so he says like, I wanted to turn myself in, but April wouldn't let me. And he's like, I don't know what April sees in me, but like she's amazing, basically. And he's like, please consider like all of this before you like turn me in. And Sade is basically like, I'm not going to turn you in. Like, I mean, she didn't want to kill Jude, but like she didn't like she's not like, I'm not gonna turn you in, basically. And Frances says like, I'm a good for nothing addict and I'd kill again for April Owens. So Elizabeth gets released from the hospital and they have like a welcome back party or whatever, and they're watching Shrek 3, and Baz and Elizabeth like finally get to reunite, really, and like Elizabeth cries. And that night Sade like thinks she wakes up from a nightmare, and Persephone's like in her room bringing her a dream, but then or bringing her dinner, and then Persephone says like, none of this is true, wake up. And she does, and then she like really wakes up that time, and like she finds a note from Persephone telling her like to eat dinner, basically. And so the next day there is another school assembly, and the website is like still getting around, and the headmaster says like basically whoever like is behind the website is going to be expelled, and he asked Sade to stay behind. Okay, this is the other part I didn't know. How did he figure out it was her?
I don't know.
Yeah, that I don't know. So somehow they had figured out that it was Sade. So they keep her all day and they're questioning her, and she is expelled. And so she's told like that she has to leave by like Wednesday or whatever, and I don't know what day it is. It's like a couple days out. So she goes to her room, and Elizabeth decided like just to go home already. So she's gone, and Sade's in there packing her things, and Persephone comes asking like, is it true that you got expelled? And she says, yeah. And so Persephone is like, can I kiss you? And Sade says like, won't that make it complicated? Like, I'm leaving. And Persephone's like, so what? Make it complicated. And she kisses her. Like, oh, they took the whole book. So articles are now being written about like the school and like the website. And of course there's some people who like support the website, and there's some people that think, oh, how terrible this is. Like, it's taking down these boys. Okay, Brock Turner. Like,
right.
What you did these actions on your own. These are illegal actions. You did not care about these girls. Yeah. Like, no, like that's a consequence.
Should have a consequence.
Yeah, they should. Like, that's what happens when you rape people. Like, and why can I not think of what it's called when you like share people's like nudes? What is that called again? I'm like, it's like blanking. I don't know, but it's illegal. Like, you can't. Yeah. Oh dang it! It was like right there. Like when you like expose people like in their nudes, like because you're mad at them. I can't think what it's called, but anyways, like that's illegal. So Jessica comes to her, like she's still like packing. It's like Tuesday, so it's the day before she was supposed to have to leave. And Jessica comes to Sade and is like, Miss Blackburn wants to see you. And she's like, oh my God, like what does she want? So she goes to see her, and she starts apologizing for Mr. Weber. And she's like, I don't believe that you deserve to be expelled. Like, what you did was the right thing. And we learned that Miss Blackburn is now the new headmaster because the board like voted and decided that Mr. Weber like wasn't doing his job correctly. And she says, I'm not expelling you. Like, I'm going to give you a chance. And she basically needs 3 letters of recommendation to be like reinstilled into like the school. And Miss Blackburn says like she'll write one of the letters. And so Sade's like, do I even want to stay here? But then she thinks like, I actually have like a family here. I have friends. I have people who care about me. So she does want to stay. And so we jump to 1 year later. It is actually Pi Day. It's March 14th. And she is like, we learned she's been going to therapy. She does not speak to April because April's freaking weird. And I'm going to talk about this at the end. But yeah, so she doesn't talk to April anymore. They don't speak. But her and Persephone like are a couple now. And April is like still dating Francis. But Francis decided to like transfer to a different school. And August is no longer attending the school. He's like getting homeschooled for his last year. And we learned that April's charges, like she was like supposedly like found guilty for all of this, even though it wasn't her. But her charges were like, of course, handled like outside of court, like quietly. So I'm sure her parents just paid like a big lump sum. And Sade is now like the head of the swim team and like is just having a great life. The end.
The end.
So, what did you rate this?
Okay, so going back through this.
Originally.
Going back through this, I definitely dropped the score a little. So I'm going with 4 stars.
Okay.
It wasn't boring at all. I think that it was a very fun read. I feel like there were some issues though with
the plot holes.
Yes. And the fact that it just didn't seem like they were teenagers. Like,
yeah, no.
The way that they talked and just
and there wasn't a reason for it.
Yeah, it wasn't realistic.
No.
I enjoyed it.
This is what happens when we, like, dive into books. Like, vibes were like, yeah, great. But then, like, when you look at the details, like, so, okay, we never talk about the burn marks on April.
And we don't get a reason why the UV light bulbs were sent to the room either. I mean,
yeah,
obviously but if she's been doing it or writing on the walls this whole time.
Yeah.
Like.
So, yeah, like, was that August or was it Elizabeth? Like, I'm so confused. And, like, what was August's point? Like, what was the whole, like, the music box came and then the music box left? And, like, what was that? Like,
didn't the music box come back, but it wasn't the same music box?
And, like, did you want to get caught? Or, like, what was the purpose of what he was doing? Like, I don't get it. Like, was it to scare her or, like, to lead her somewhere? Like, I'm so confused about that. And also, yeah, like, the way they talk, like, it's almost like, okay, are they in a secret society? But, like, I guess it never really comes out. Like, are they trying to invoke, like, Hawkings? Like, is that why they talk the way they do? Because it seems like to be, like, a significant plot point, but it's not at all. Like, that's weird.
That's suspicious.
Yeah, I just, like, I don't know. Yeah, I'm going to give it a 3.5.
Yeah, vibes, I think it was there.
Yeah. I like the twist about, like, her and her sister.
Yeah.
That was good. There was just too much. That's the other thing with this, but I felt like it was a lot longer than it needed to be. Like, we could have cut out a lot of stuff. Like, there was two, like, and I know a lot of books like this, like, the ending, like, was the last, like, I listened to audiobook. Like, the last hour of it was, like, all that stuff. So I spent 12 hours of, like, okay, like, let's get to it. Like, and for, like, none of it to really be relevant. Like, like the lost and found thing, when she found, like, the necklace that said Connor on it, like the 4-leaf clover. Like, that's why I even mentioned that in my notes, because it's like, it meant absolutely nothing. And, like, sometimes there are things that mean nothing in books, but I just feel if there was so much, like, filler that didn't need to be in this book. So, like, I don't know how many books this author has written, but, like, I definitely, like the direction, but there's stuff that definitely can be cut out. Yeah, so I agree. I'll give it a 3.5. Yeah, I'm kind of confused at the end of it. Also, I mean, like, I was kind of rush reading this, but even, like, talking to Keely, I'm like, am I missing, like, all of these details, or, like, were there plot holes? Because I'm like, yeah. And also, so did he take her sister to Paris?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if it was, like, a routine thing that
because when she was like, I hate Paris, I thought that was going to come back. Like, that was going to be part of, like, I found out that he took my sister to Paris. And, like, that, I don't know. There's lots of thoughts, but they don't connect. That's the biggest thing. But, yeah, so, like, I don't know. I'd recommend it. I also struggle, like, I thought Persephone I thought it was going to be Persephone. Like, I thought she was a red herring that was, like, meant to trick us. Like, I thought she was going to have something to do with it. And she did not. April's just weird. Like, okay, like, I get that that's your brother, but, like, you also were raped. But, like, then why don't they talk now? Like, that's weird. Yeah. I don't get it. Like, I'm like, I don't know. It's a lot. There's a lot of pieces. But, I mean, yeah, vibe-wise, I enjoyed. When I look at the details, that's when we find issues. So our next read is going to be This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan, which is the sequel to Before I Let Go that we did in February. So I'm super excited. Is this one about Soledad?
Yes. And so you don't necessarily have to have read Before I Let Go.
Yeah.
But there are little spoilers in there. For it, but oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
I know, I really enjoyed it. Like, I'm excited to read it. Yeah, so I think that's our next read, and then we'll be, like, back in Crescent City, which I'm super excited for. Yeah, I feel like months are flying by, because this is actually, by the time you guys listen to this episode, I have been married for a month. This is So we're like a month ahead in recording, which is crazy. But yeah, I think that's all. So if you aren't already, make sure you're following us on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook at Booktrospective. I think we should, by this point, have YouTube videos. I hope. Fingers crossed. I've been recording us. I just got to actually post them. And it probably will be like the unedited versions of us. Like, it's not going to be synced with the audio exact. Like, I'll have to add audio to it, but yeah, I'll figure it out. So just bear with me. One platform at a time. I got to figure it out. But yeah, so make sure you're following us there and like check out the website. And I think that's it. Anything else?
I think that's all.
All right. Bye.
Bye.